Welcome back for another episode of Jofo in the Ring. Yes, I am your Wednesday night delight, Kyle, the spoiler Morin, and alongside me, as always lately, Mr. Jeremy Prophet. Jeremy, welcome back. Thank you again for being here.
That's right, Jeremy Prophet, silver tongue sex symbol, Black Dynamite, the star of the show, the man that makes you so much better at your job just by being around here and breathing the same air as you. Tell you what, why is it you always get to do the intro? Why can't I do it once in a while?
I mean, you could. You have to beat me in an arm wrestling match, though, off air, and the fans can never see it.
Did you want me to use my index or my pinky? Because I'm sure I could take you with either.
I think those ring fingers will do fine.
I think the rings look fantastic on me.
They do look great.
They do, because one of us has to bring a sense of fashion and eloquence to this show. You're wearing a very nice shirt.
Thank you.
I'll give you that much.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we still see your face. We still see the glare that comes off of your bald head that makes me have to wear these glasses. But I digress. Maybe one day we might change things up. Obviously, Frank Jofo is going to be back, so who knows how that's going to go. Maybe we might get that girl in from India to call one of these shows with me. That could be a lot of fun than having to stare at you for the course of an hour and a half.
The future is bright.
Indeed.
And so our guest today, our last guest of 2020, a fantastic guest. Matter of fact, he's just incredible.
Not just the coolest, not just the best, but just incredible.
Let's get to the action. And the name of the show is Jofo, stands for Just Our Fucking Opinion. So don't censor yourself. Just let it fly.
Very good.
Don't worry about it. And my name's Kyle, by the way. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, brother. My pleasure.
Yeah, he's Kyle. He's not a wrestler, as you can tell by the look of him. Although in this day and age, anything passes for a wrestler out there on the indies.
That is true.
He's doing the world a favor by not stepping in the ring, not stepping between the ropes, and keeping it to the professionals.
Doing the world a favor by not putting a singlet on.
Very good. Very good.
And so I guess a good place to start, because most people probably know who you are already. You and I are acquainted. We've done quite a few shows together. And I want to start off by saying it's really an honor to have you on here with us.
Thank you.
But maybe we can go back to the beginning of your career. You could tell us a bit about your training.
Sure.
I know you got a special tie-in with Canada.
Yep.
And that's something I think that a lot of our listeners would be curious to hear about.
Okay. I got into the business. This was 1992, and wrestling schools, it wasn't like it is today, where there are, with the internet and the way social media is, and so much information for young men and women that want to get into the wrestling business. There is out there for them. That's not, when I got in, we didn't have that advantage. So I was literally 19 years old and working at a grocery store, just, as a bag boy, making extra money. I just graduated high school, and I saw an article. I always wanted to be a professional wrestler. I saw an article in Pro Wrestling Illustrated for the Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling Camp in Calgary. Calgary's all the way in, the northwestern part of North America. And I live in Connecticut, which is farthest east pretty much you can go. So it was a long kind of, way to travel. I didn't know there were schools in New York and close by to me. I was, kind of a mark, but nonetheless, I spoke to Bruce Hart, and in October, I'm sorry, I digress. The summer of 92, I went out to Calgary to train to be a pro wrestler.
I mean, that must have been a big step for you, being from the East Coast, going all the way out west, all the way to Calgary. Were you familiar with the Hart family and what they were?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a huge fan of the business, and also I knew, I knew about Calgary Stampede Wrestling, and Brett and Owen were in WWE at the time, or WWF, I should say. So yeah, I was well informed on the Harts and Stu and everybody. So it was just, for me, it was just an amazing opportunity. And, I saved money, and, I think it was like 2,500 Canadian, which is not too bad, comparatively speaking to today. So, I just, bought a ticket, and I went up there.
And now, when you started out there, were there any other wrestlers that have made headwaves for themselves in the business at the time in the class?
In my class, no. There was one gentleman who has wrestled. He's from North Bay, Ontario. He wrestles under the name of Big Daddy Hammer. Jake Steele, I believe, was his name. Brett Farrell is his real name.
Oh, I've met him before.
Yeah. He's a big dude, my age. I'm 47. So he was one of the ones that came out of the camp. But we started with, I believe, about 10 wrestlers, or 10 people, and it just ended up being myself and Brett at the end.
And now we hear a lot about the brutality of the
Yes.
Hart Dungeon. And so can you maybe go into some of the details of what you as a wide-eyed kid going in there had to face?
Well, it wasn't, in all disclosure, like I love to tell the stories and kind of let, I don't say much. I just mention the Hearts and people just assume that, Stu and all that stuff. But in 1992, it was a bit different. I didn't spend any time training at the dungeon, to be honest.
Oh.
Bruce Hart and Keith Hart, who owned and ran the camp, they had like a facility, like a little, they rented a place somewhere in Calgary, and Lance Storm, who had come through the camp before, was the one training the guys mostly, and Keith would come in once a week or so and get in the ring with us. So it was more like that. In Lance's camp, it was him and Jericho who were the big names, because Chris Jericho was actually trained by the same people that I was, same camp. So, at the end of the day, I was still getting quality training and learning the right way, because they really did. And although I didn't train at the dungeon, I did get a lot of the old school lessons, I should say. And they worked us hard, man. They'd have us do 500 squats before camp, and running and all kinds of, working out and stuff like that in the ring before you even took a bump. So by no means was it easy, but it wasn't as brutal as, physically brutal as people may think.
Yep. And it sounds like it's totally different to how things are now, where it's so much easier to get in the business. You have all of this information available on YouTube. You yourself have your own channel at Wrestling 101, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Pro Wrestling 101.
And I think it's great that we have access to all these tools now, where someone can go to a veteran like yourself and pick their brain through seeing that series of videos. And maybe you might want to let our listeners know how that series differs from, a lot of the so-called training going on out there by, your local trainer that you may come across on Craigslist.
For me, it was just basically, I had a unique opportunity after I was done with the Hearts to come and, I live in Connecticut. The WWE headquarters is based in Connecticut. So I kind of got lucky because of where I lived. I was in the right place at the right time. And by working so early with a lot of these amazing superstars, not just superstars, but past stars, like I worked a lot with Pat Patterson, Tony Gurria, Rene Goulet. I just got to learn and get these old school lessons. And then I figured, I had the pleasure and the privilege of these guys passing it on to me. But in this generation, a lot of men and women that are getting in, young men and women getting into the business, don't have those veterans per se on tap like I did. So I just figured, what? These aren't my lessons. These aren't things I created or made up. I just figured I'd get all these awesome lessons that I was taught from all of these guys, a bunch, of these professionals, legends, if you will, that I would just share them on YouTube and hopefully help people trying to make it. So it was just kind of just a way to pass on that information that for me was so useful and helpful,
Mm-hmm. And I think it's great to see someone who's accomplished as much as you have wanting to give back to my generation and the generation before us. I remember when it was about 6 years ago when we had met for the first time at IWE in Maine. We were on, I'd say, a good 10, 12 shows together. And as much as I could, I wanted to be around you in the same stratosphere so I could pick your brain and learn and, learn from someone who's been to the dance and made $1 in this business. And do you find when you go to independent shows that, you're met by people who want to be under the learning tree and, want to know what someone who's been a champion in a major organization has been through in this business?
Sadly enough to say no, I don't. And I don't think it's because people don't, the young men and women don't want to. I think it's a bit of an intimidation factor, I think, or they just don't know how to approach it, because I'm certainly the same way. Even today, like there might be a legend that I've never met in the business that is at a same, similar show, or, I'm backstage with, and I haven't necessarily met them. And in my mind, I start saying, well, I don't want to go over there and mark out and they don't know who I am. I start playing these head games myself even though I have going on 30 years in the business. So I do that too. So I don't discredit them. I don't think it's like they don't mean to do it, but I find that at times, I'm at these shows and a lot of people do not ask at all to kind of, help out, very rarely actually. So I would just, not because it's me, just anybody. If you're on a show with somebody that you respect and that you feel can help you, I would just, you'd be surprised how many people are willing to help and give you information. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask, but I do get it. I understand, because in some ways I'm still that 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid and get, nervous sometimes talking to guys I admire too. So I mean, I get it.
Mhm. Well, I mean, maybe our mentality is different because, you do a lot of shows in the Northeast, all over the United States. And, the odds of someone being on a show with you, especially if they're in your territory,
Right.
it's probably a lot more than us here stuck in the Great White North,
Sure.
where, it's rare that someone of your caliber comes up here to do a show. Maybe it's one time a year. It's certainly not on a
Sure.
regular basis, like the 10 to 15 shows that we were on together.
Right.
So for me, I have that hunger where I'll see someone like you and I'll want to, get close and learn, take some of those tricks and apply it to what I'm doing, maybe even apply it that same night.
Yeah.
But now you mentioned, if we can take it back to our timeline here, you as a young man getting into the business with the Hearts, when did you have your first match? It was after training for about how long?
The camp was from July, the first week of July till the last week of August. We trained Monday through Friday, 2 hours a night. So, and it was about an 8-week period. And after that, I went home in September. Mind you, we had to pay to stay out there and stuff. So it was expensive for me, just to kind of live out there and, do this. So I came home for a little bit. And then I got a call saying that they're going to start this promotion, the people up in Calgary, called Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling, where they're going to run right across the street from the Calgary Saddle Dome in this small, bingo hall, so to speak, out there. And, probably 100, it holds 100, 150 people. And they're going to run every Friday. So back then, I booked my ticket and I stayed out there for the first 10 weeks of Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling, wrestling once a week. And in my first 10 matches, my first match was on my 19th birthday. I wrestled Big Daddy Hammer, Jake Steele, on October 16th, 1992. I got the victory in front of like 50 people. And then my fourth ever match, I wrestled Chris Jericho, who was like 2 years into the business, like I said, from the same school. And then I got to wrestle, my teacher, my mentor, Lance Storm, I think 2 or 3 matches after that. So, when I wrestled in Calgary, we had the real privilege of wrestling guys that had been working for the Hearts in Calgary. I wrestled guys with, like Jerry Morrow, who some people might know, who wrestled in All Japan and had a great career in Canada and abroad. So, just to name one, Skull Mason as well, like just some real Calgary, old school cats. And, I just got to learn from those guys and really tried to understand kind of what it was like. And really, you got to understand, like, wow, this isn't anything like it is on television, where you're wrestling for a handshake, putting up the ring, tearing it down, and just happy to be on the card. And then finally, a couple of weeks before Christmas of 1992, I ran out of money and I had to come home, But then that's where my journey kind of started with the WWE and kind of trying to meet people in the business back home, because I really had no contacts, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you think like when you graduate or finish a wrestling school, you're going to just get this open door, and that wasn't the case. So I came back home like, yeah, I knew some people in Calgary, but I didn't know anybody else here. So I think it was January or February of 93, I'd actually had the balls enough to go to a WWE house show and, bring my gear, like they always tell you, bring your gear. And I walked backstage and I was just like, hi, my name is PJ. I was trained by the Hearts. If you need anybody, I'm here. And I met Tony Gurria that night, and he was kind enough to let me watch the show, backstage. And as I was saying my goodbyes and thanking him for his hospitality, he goes, we're starting this new show in Manhattan called Monday Night Raw, we're going to need, some extras and jobbers, basically, and if you're interested, here's my card. And that's what I did. And I started to do jobs for, WWF as an extra. And that's how the journey started. And then from there, I just was meeting people and, starting to build a bit of a reputation,
I remember you telling me when we had spoken, I think you had done a match with Mr. Perfect was one of your first ones.
Yeah. Mr. Perfect. I wrestled him in, I don't know if it was Halifax or Sydney, Nova Scotia. I wrestled Kurt Hennig. And I actually, on that tour, I wrestled Kurt. I think it was in Halifax, and The Undertaker in Sydney on that tour.
Wow.
That's back in the day where they did Wrestling Superstars and Wrestling Challenge back in those days,
Yep. And then from there, eventually, I think they discovered that you could speak Portuguese.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that was where Aldo Montoya came about.
Yeah, I'd been doing jobs there for a little bit, and Vince was always very kind. And obviously, the one thing you get when you're doing jobs there, they're not looking at you, but nonetheless, you're there. I was there on a weekly basis because back then, if we remember, this was the time of the steroid trial. So the WWE was really trying to keep all their TV tapings for cost cutting measures in the Northeast. So, I was right here. So just out of geography alone, they would always call me. And, Vince and I had gotten to know each other. He's behind the monitor every week. And of course, he's seeing me every week. So long story short, they brought in Brian Lee to do the fake Undertaker gimmick in '94. And they didn't have a performance center back then, but they had their TV studio, and they put up a ring at the TV studio in Stamford, which is about 40 minutes from my house. And me, Mark Undertaker, and Brian Lee, we worked all week in the ring. And on the last day, we did a dress rehearsal for Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson. And, everything went great. They were very happy. And afterwards, that's when Pat started asking me questions about who trained me and what was my nationality. And lo and behold, they were looking all along for a Portuguese fella to do the Aldo Montoya gimmick, because that was already written, not for me. It was, there was something they were already looking to do with someone else. And I just happened to be, once again, right place, right time.
And I really feel they went all in on the Aldo Montoya gimmick. They gave you the elaborate entrance with the sparklers. You had merchandise. I remember it was a character that definitely caught my attention because, you were colorful, very athletic in your wrestling also. And it took me a lot of years before I even found out that because I first saw you as Just Incredible.
Sure.
And I guess because of the mask, I never connected that you were also Aldo Montoya. And it really took me back to my childhood that I was like, oh, wow, I was a fan of his then. And, now I'm in high school. We're, at the heart of the Attitude Era. And there you are as ECW champion.
Sure.
And it was really mind boggling that it was the same person. But, I'd been a fan of you all along, and getting into the business, getting to work alongside you, it was really an honor. So when you were Aldo Montoya, I saw that you had a singles career. You had some tag matches. I think you also teamed with X-Pac at one point when he was the 1, 2, 3 Kid.
Yeah.
And of course, you guys would go on to be X Factor at a later point. Yep. How did that friendship come about? Were you guys just friends from the get-go, or was that like they put us together and, hey, this works?
At first, in the Aldo 1, 2, 3 Kid days, they just put us together. And we both had a mutual friend in Scott Hall. Scott was a good friend of mine, and it was obviously great, even better friends with Pac. And we were on the road so much, I couldn't rent a car or do anything like that. So Scott Hall just kind of took me under his wing and said, I'll, come with me, and we split rooms, we split rental cars, etc. So that kind of brought me in with him and kind of introduced me to his friends, which were like, obviously Sean Waltman, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, and stuff like that. It was just one of those things. We spent so much time together on the road that it was just you have to gravitate somewhere, because we would spend more time with these fellows than you would with your own family. So when we finally did X Factor, we were very close, and to this day we're still close. So.
I still remember that theme song for X Factor. Remember that the Uncle Cracker song?
Uncle Cracker song. And
Yeah,
the
Uncle Cracker and Kid Rock.
Yo, you dealing with the X Factor?
Yeah,
Well,
I got everything.
The reason I brought that in, it was my idea. Was Uncle Cracker was part of Kid Rock, and remember Little Joey C?
Yeah, the Twisted Brown Trucker Band.
Yeah, he was a big wrestling fan. So Joey and I had become good friends, and so I got to become friends with some of the guys in Kid Rock. And Uncle Cracker's older brother, Mike Schaefer, became my manager because they were all wrestling fans. So he was doing a lot of my personal business and helping me kind of negotiate my contract with the WWE when I went back to do X Factor. So then I was just like, well, hey, instead of having that corny generic music, let's just use one of Matt being Uncle Cracker, use one of Cracker's songs just to kind of differentiate than some generic song, and the Office went along with it, and I just thought it was cool. Sometimes I got a lot of heat for it, but that was the point. I wanted to get heat for the song. You know what I mean? I didn't want it to get over. We were supposed to be heels, so it is what it is. But it's funny because everybody remembers the song more than the tag team, I think.
It was a great song.
No,
I think it was great for two reasons. Because like he said, it gets heat. When you hear that, I got everything I ever wanted, and I'll never give that back.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it, it was a good freaking song.
It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, and like they'd used Kid Rock songs before in Uncle Cracker songs,
right?
And it worked perfectly because
Kid Rock's in the Hall of Fame now.
Yeah. Is he really?
Yeah, they put him in.
Yeah, that's right. A couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I forgot about that. I used to be the biggest Kid Rock guy, and then when like Taker came out to a song, and then you guys had that song, I was like, "Fucking wrestling and Kid Rock." What 2001 is amazing.
Yeah.
But,
if you were a little shorter, you could almost be the new Joe C.
I was, I'm thinking about it, but I'm going for Butterbean now. That's what I'm.
Jesus.
So that was that friendship. So you were kind of one of the founding members of what became the Clique. You were right there.
I wouldn't say founding members because everybody always asks that. I would just say, look, I was friends with those guys, and to identify myself as that just kind of makes me feel like a poser. It's like I was never as close to those guys as they were with each other, but I was definitely there for a lot of that stuff. So it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Because technically,
go ahead.
I mean, not to stir the pot or anything, but and maybe I'm a little biased because I think the world of you, but you would have been entrenched with those guys even before Triple H.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
In terms of timeline,
absolutely.
I was there before.
I was there before Hunter, but he just played. He has that song "Play the Game" for a reason, and he just knew how to play the game. Dead ass. He was very smart at what he did. Where I was a lot less. Down your throat, stab you in the back. I was more of a real friend, and in the wrestling business, sometimes that could be your enemy.
That's true. We've had people on here, and they had the great quote of, an honest politician is a bad politician.
Amen.
So it could be a case of that.
Yes,
so maybe take us on the journey now from the WWF to ECW and how that all came about.
I gotten to the point where Aldo obviously ran its course, and there wasn't going to be much more for the character, and I just simply thought it was time to go. I had asked Vince to do, I wanted to do some different stuff, and nothing really came to fruition. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash at that point had also left for WCW, and they were very close with Bischoff in the office. And in my conversations with Scott, he's like, yo, just come down to WCW. We'll get you paid. I don't know what I would have been or what character, but nonetheless, we'll give you a job. I got a meeting with Vince, and I went up and I said, Vince, I appreciate everything. I still had like a year and a half or something in my contract. And I asked for my release, and he said, it's a bad look for me if I give you my release. I said, a couple of my better guys have just left for WCW. He goes, I can't let you go. He goes, but I'll send you to Memphis to learn how to work as a heel, and then I'll bring you back up. So I said, all right, whatever, what can I do? I'm under contract. So I went to Memphis for about 6 weeks, Jerry Lawler's territory at the time. And I worked as a heel, and, it was miserable. I wasn't learning anything, but in the meantime, WCW or ECW and USWA, which was Lawler's territory in Memphis, were doing an angle with ECW, and they had Van Dam, Heyman, Sabu, and Chris Candido down there. And Chris and I were good friends from the WWE, and he goes, PJ, he goes, you should come to ECW. It's really happening. There's good money to be made here, a lot of opportunity. So long story real short, he talked to Heyman, Heyman talked to Vince, and that was that.
And was it a slow progression for you? Did you have to kind of get your feet wet in ECW, or did Heyman have the vision?
He had, well, I mean, the reason I did the jean shorts wasn't a creative thing. All I had was my Aldo stuff, and I literally had come in right away. So it was like, I was like, Paul, what do I wear? He goes, here, just get a pair of jean shorts and I'll throw you an ECW shirt, and we'll use that for now. And I was like, okay. And then it took off right away. I mean, my second match ever was a really good match with Jerry Lynn at the ECW arena. And then Paul just kind of saw that and he was like gangbusters with it. So it just kind of became that by default. But it happened quickly. And I would attest that to, ECW was going places quickly. And it wasn't that I was so spectacular or so amazing. I was just, I'd had a couple of years under WWE TV, meaning that I have more experience working live television, etc., where a lot of his talent did not. So at least I could be some kind of know what I mean? Know what I'm doing when I go to live television. When they started to do a lot of pay-per-views as well, I wasn't a fish out of water. I knew how to work that situation where a lot of his homegrown talent, like the Sandman, Sabu, etc., didn't have that experience. Or even Taz at the time. Realistically, they were all very green. So it was just a way to kind of get guys who had been there, done that, into his system. And that's it.
And I think that speaks volumes to the good symbiosis that everyone talks about from ECW, where you all learned from each other, all did great matches, great atmosphere in the locker rooms. I know that for our crew here, ECW, and your presence there as well, is very near and dear to our hearts, because in Canada, we didn't have access to ECW until it got on TNN, which some people consider to be the more lackluster years of ECW because of how the network treated it. But for us, it was the greatest thing because now we could finally get access to it each week, and you were the man on top with the championship when that started. And so for us, I mean, we see you as, being a top guy akin to an Austin or, a Sting or a Hogan, whoever was on top in WCW. In fact, a lot of people here were more watching ECW than WCW because they were, a little bit on the decline at the time. So what was the pressure like when they finally put the championship on you? Can you maybe tell us a bit about that?
It was pressure. I mean, especially in ECW because, we had so many great talents doing so much stuff. Like, I would literally watch the opening match and you'd have Balls and Axel against the Dudleys doing 25 minutes, chairs, tables, blood. And I'm like, I got to go on with Tommy Dreamer last. How the hell am I going to, and not to mention Sabu, RVD, Jerry Lynn, whoever to Jerry, so many greats. So it's Shane Douglas. So it was scary. It was very scary. But again, it also gave you the incentive to work hard. And Paul was, he gets credit for being a great booker, and he was at times, but Paul was better as a motivator. He made each and every one in that locker room believe in themselves to the point where he was so great at talking us up that we believed that we could do what he said we could do. And it gave us a sense of, man, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes all you need is a pat on the back and somebody believing in you. And being in the WWE for so long, that was kind of not the way. They never give you a compliment, and you never knew if you were doing right or wrong. And to have somebody like Paul Heyman, who was one of the smartest guys in the business, telling you you're one of the best and you could absolutely do this, then you go out there feeling a little different, and you go out there with this little chip on your shoulder, and you're able to perform the way you can. A lot of times, man, it's not the guys and gals that mess up when they get to WWE. It's WWE in itself that is somewhat a prison because of the expectations or the barriers that they put up themselves for these athletes. Because if they were just given the opportunities like ECW gave us, it was just an open palette. Like if we were a painter, we had an open canvas to paint. If they would just let these guys and gals do that, I think they'd be a lot better off. So I think WWE at times is their own worst enemy to their performers trying to, go out there and do great things. I really believe that.
And do you feel that that comes down to Vince McMahon himself?
I think it does. I think it comes down to Vince, and I also think it comes down to just the whole structural thing, man. It's just it's a cesspool at times. I mean, it could be a very great place to work. Don't get me wrong; they treat you very well, and everything is real nice and stuff. But it also some of the mind games they play are at least when I was there, were just very, very difficult to deal with. I mean, they'd stick it with you to the core. And I never understood it. I never, and again, I'm not saying it's not like WWE policy, but you employ so many different people from so many different walks of life. And, you have so many agents and, people that write TV, and, you might have heat with one guy, or this guy might not like you. It's such a shit show at times of people you feel you have to please, that you don't have let me just go out there, do the best work I know I can do. Because everybody has their own motivation, right? Because the agent that's taking care of your match, he wants the match to be good for himself, because he's got to report to Vince too. And if your match sucks, he's going to take the heat for it as well. So it's all kinds of stuff like that, where I think the structure in WWE is flawed and broken, where I just think if they gave everyone the opportunity to just create and to run a little more free, it would work wonders. Because like Vince always, when he says that, the wrestlers, they just got to reach for that brass ring, that, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest bunch of bullshit, because it's the wrestling business. It's just like acting. If I'm supposed to be a lead in a movie, and the character I'm playing dies in the second act, I can't say, well, I'm reaching for the brass ring. And I'm not, you know what I mean? It's like, you have to have, the storylines, you have to have the production, you have to have all the help you can get to be successful. Because let me tell you, man, in ECW, Just Incredible could do no wrong. That same guy went to WWE with the same talent, if not more, and couldn't get a leg up because of restrictions put upon you. So, I think until they reach a certain point, and I don't know if they ever will, they're going to keep getting stuck in this place, because the reason that DX got over was because they were a bunch of outlaws that said, in real life, in backstage politics, that said, screw this. They had enough control and power to be able to do that. And I don't think there's a lot of men and women out there that can do that kind of thing these days, because they don't have, they don't have the same amount of the same relationships with the office, with Vince, and with people that matter. Everybody's just like, they have their own little place on the show, and that's it. You're never going to really break that glass ceiling. So you just have a bunch of people doing what they're told, and that's, and you have they have all the talent in the world there. I just don't think they're given the opportunity that they need individually to shine the way that they need to for the company. Because right now, I mean, what did Monday Night Raw last week do? 1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's
lowest all time.
Yep.
That's really scary, dude.
Yep.
So.
Well, looking at it, and I'll just give you some food for thought of what you're saying there, because in your second run with the company, it came at a time where WCW was way on the decline. ECW also not too far behind. They had a lot of power because they were the only place people could work. So then they could really tighten that grip on their talent, that you're going to do things our way and what we say is right. And they became kind of the Catholic Church of wrestling.
Yep.
So I think that probably added to the problem. And I think that maybe now there might be more opportunities because, AEW is booming. New Japan doing extremely well, Ring of Honor, MLW, these companies gaining notoriety, that people realize that WWE isn't the only game in town. And, if they don't if they're not a good fit, they can easily go make the same kind of money and make a living elsewhere.
And now there's also the AEW Impact collab. So they're kind of joining and taking down the big guy almost.
It might be the time for, the wrestlers to stand up and say that this system is broken. We're not going to be, blinded to what the world is and what this company wants us to be in spite of what we should be.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity is certainly there, no doubt. I just don't know, man. I just don't think that that there's anybody out there like, look, a guy like Steve Austin could not be denied, right? Who are the next guys like that? Not necessarily like him, but who you know what I mean? It's like even in AEW though, they have all this wonderful talent, and I just feel like everything is so other than what just happened with Kenny Omega and with Impact Wrestling, etc. It's still like you have 1 week, 2 weeks, and then this week we went back to normal. And I do a podcast with Vince Russo reviewing AEW, and it's like you lose momentum so quickly. I just feel I think the way the business is run today, I think that's legitimately broken. I honestly think that the buddy system is way too prevalent in AEW. I think that's a huge problem. And I think in WWE, everybody there has just conformed to making a paycheck. I've yet to find real renegades that are that have a leader, aka like maybe a Paul Heyman or someone else that is going to do things completely off the cuff. Yes, there's a whole game in place to do that. I don't know. I just think people are nervous about it. Like, you know what I mean? Because when you tell the big man, when you tell Vince to F off, it's kind of drawing a line in the sand. So I think people are always, at the end of the day, they always want to make sure they can go to Vince. So I think people kind of are careful with how they word things. Even myself here, even though I'm realistically could never go back there, even if I wanted to as an agent or something else. But you never want to badmouth the biggest name in the business. And I just think that the WWE is in real transition of, the sports entertainment that we knew and loved 10, 15, 20 years ago and where it's going. It's becoming more and more of a television production movie company than it is a wrestling company, especially now with COVID, no touring, no house shows. We really don't even know who's over anymore. If you think about it, right? Like they tell me Orange Cassidy's over. I really don't know that because he hasn't been in front of a real live crowd for many, 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 many months. Same with WWE. I don't know if, Drew McIntyre, although I love Drew McIntyre, if he's really over, like you tell me, you know what I mean? It's like we're just being fed what they want. And I think when we start to get some kind of normalcy back in the game with fans getting into buildings and just slowly getting back, hopefully, to some kind of normalcy, will we start to see things change? But we're a good year before things start to, I think we're going to stay on this kind of flat line for at least a year before something happens. I'll say WrestleMania next year is when things will start to kind of pop differently, hopefully, Yep.
And you bring up a great point about how with no fans, we don't know who's over. And I think furthermore to that point, and why I say WWE is kind of like the Catholic Church is because really they have one central figure, which is the Pope, which like WWE is Vince McMahon. And I think that people right now are wrestling to appease Vince. They have to just please one person because there are no fans. They're in control of what the people's reactions are on the screen. They're in control of what the pops are right now because it's all just button push and they dub it in. Right. And so there's really only one man that people are wrestling to impress. And, maybe in AEW, it's the same thing where you're wrestling to impress your friends backstage, to Tony Khan, the boss, because there's no other way of gauging the metrics. So to know you did your job is this boss man going to have a smile on his face when you walk through the curtain, or is he going to chew you out? I get that.
And nobody's saying that. I mean, they just brought Keith Lee up to the main roster, got a big debut, fights Randy Orton, back to the Performance Center because Vince didn't like him.
Yeah. And it's very odd. It's very odd, and I don't think, again, I think that Performance Center, I think keeping guys in that little bubble only hurts guys, there's no, because, the Performance Center almost has a negative connotation where a guy like, what's his name? Johnny Gargano's at the Performance Center when he's better than 90% of the guys on any roster, right? Or up there as far as talent. I think the whole structure needs to change. And like I said, I don't necessarily have I don't know what to do, but something has to be done, because they're just letting, some guys that are so good are going to sit in NXT forever. And when they finally get to the main roster, it's like, it doesn't matter anymore. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, everybody's still on television. Everybody's still being, you know what I mean? They're still playing a character. They're still playing a role. It's just all so twisted right now. We need to get back to a time where, look, when Daniel Bryan got fired, people made sure he came back with the fans. And it was almost like, we'll riot if he doesn't come back kind of thing. Like, fans were at the shows chanting his name, etc. That happened with a lot of guys that were over, where it's like, it was undeniable until we could put the power back to the fan. It's just, wrestling on the internet is what it's become. And it's kind of depressing, because I watch a lot of wrestling during the week, and it just all to me looks the same. It's very hard to differentiate, because you can't emote emotion. You have the hard cameras, like, looking at a big screen with the graphic of the show and no fans, and you're just doing high spots that all look the same. There's no heat. There's no emotion of storytelling. It's like, I don't care about any of these performers. And again, it's not through any fault of their own. It's just, it's a weird time. And I think none of these promotions have really hit the nail on the head to grasp it for what it is. Like, they should be doing like vignettes and stuff, like old ECW vignettes of just like you in a little corner talking about, shit, something. Make wrestling real again. Like, somebody said something to you online, and I'm not a big fan of Twitter beefs or trolls or stuff like that, but like Jim Ross mentioned something recently about the high spots with the dives, and like kind of criticizing all those kids doing like the dives into like a bunch of wrestlers waiting for them. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
He got a lot of heat for saying something like that on one of his podcasts. Shit, that should be since the AEW has nothing else to write or talk about, because they really don't have any storylines that are encompassing. That should be the main focus of the show. Have the guys that do that kind of come out and face Jim Ross in the announce table, say, you know what, you're talking all this smack about us doing this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? Like, bring a realism, try some different stuff out, because obviously wrestling is not being watched like it used to be in the Attitude Era, where there was 3 or 4 million people watching Raw and 3 or 4 million people watching Nitro. You got 1.5 million people right now on a Monday night. So obviously something has to change. So do something to try to make it different. Cater to the fans that you have, which are the internet fans at this point. And maybe through that, some stuff will start to gain traction. It doesn't hurt to throw some shit out there and see if it sticks, right? Because right now it all seems so regurgitated and old and just not genuine. It's just, again, it becomes difficult to watch for me. And these guys and gals are super good. That's the other thing too, is that they're kind of getting cheesed out, because they're great performers. They're just not getting the platform that I think they deserve, because it's just not there right now because of no fans and just everything else.
Mm-hmm. It's so hard to care too. I mean, like when Drew McIntyre, who I love, by the way, I think
me
he's
too.
fantastic.
I think he's great. I think he's fantastic too. Yeah.
Like when he won the Rumble, I was so pumped for him. Especially they did it right. They had like the promotion. They had like all the videos from Scotland, the pubs blowing up, everybody going insane. He came out. I did my 19-year journey. They built it perfectly. COVID hits. The match happens, there was no it's not that I didn't care. It was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
He deserved so much better. Like his first title reign would have been 10 times what it was had there have been a crowd.
Well, one of the things that I'm critical about, and because we talk off the air and stuff, is the lack of heat, as PJ had mentioned, in that in the old days, you would go to see wrestling because you hated that heel. You would pay your money to want to see that person get a beating, get what's coming to them. And I kind of feel that nowadays in wrestling, they're a little scared to go in that direction. They don't want to offend people. Everyone's sensitive. Everyone is, so there's a lack of real, genuine heat in the business. Yeah. And I think that that's a reason why there's decline
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you look at
Look,
he's a strong element of heat, or like exhibitions, gymnastic exhibitions,
right.
athleticism. Not that there's anything wrong with athleticism. I'm an athletic guy in the ring too, but there still has to be that element of violence, of brutality, and of heat that will make people want to actually see and engage in the story.
Well, exactly. I remember. So we were talking before about ECW not being widely available in Canada. So my father lives in the States. So when I was a kid, I used to go visit him, and then we'd scroll on TV. And one day I tuned into TNN, the Nashville network at the time. And I saw this bald guy in jean shorts teeing off on Tommy Dreamer with a kendo stick. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And then
Jesus.
I kept watching, and then I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And then I had to come back and tell everybody in Canada about it. At my high school. I was like, dude, you got to see this fucking shit. It's amazing. They got fucking this guy named Just Incredible, Jerry Lynn, RVD, and just if I were to tune into WWE now, I wouldn't get that same. I got to watch next week. I got to see if this guy's going to get back at for Just Incredible for hitting him with the kendo stick. There's none of that now. It's hard to care.
And
it is really hard. But the thing is, I don't know if they understand how to even get that back. I really don't. You have to take chances. And like you said, we live in that cancel culture, in a culture of we're scared to say the wrong things. Like when I do interviews now or podcasts, I'm afraid to say the wrong thing or just to you know what I mean? I'm very cautious at what I say. And I don't think I say anything too crazy, but everybody's just so ready to jump down your throat that it makes it uncomfortable to play in that area. So I think we just get a lot of guys that are nervous or scared. Could you imagine? I mean, I know you guys are a little younger than me, but like some of the big bands of my day, like the Nirvanas and the Pearl Jams and bands that would just say what they wanted to say, like grunge bands or heavy metal bands, or even rap, like hip hop stuff from that era. We're just so used to, being PC and politically correct that we're afraid of our own shadow. We're afraid of getting canceled on Twitter one day. And that happens like more than anybody could even imagine. Vince Russo just got canceled from his whole YouTube channel because something he said about Dave Meltzer that was completely taken out of context. And somebody complained and his whole channel got canceled. Just happened today. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I wanted to actually go back to Vince Russo because you had mentioned him and we know you're part of his brand. I know he gets a bad rap and I really don't understand why. I think a lot of it is just, WWE has this dogma, this mentality of, we want to bend a narrative. But I, for one, am a fan of a lot of the stuff Vince Russo put out there and a lot of what he suggests because he was able to stand up to Vince at the time and change the product from being a kid's show, nothing happening PG show, almost like what it is now, into one of the best eras in all of wrestling. And because he was willing to take risks that actually brought in the casual viewer, not just the wrestling fan who, quite frankly, will watch no matter what. They'll watch if it was, two stuffed pandas wrestling in a ring. With that said, I mean, why is it you think that Vince Russo isn't employed by one of the main companies right now with the ideas that he's bringing to the table, even a company like WWE, where right now they're in a position where their ratings are as low as they could be. They've got to be, somewhat willing to listen to somebody who's been to the dance and help them get success.
I think it comes down to, honestly, just not have. I think they feel they don't have to. They're not going to give him the satisfaction. And I didn't, before, just in disclosure, before I got into doing this stuff with Russo for his podcast for the AEW show, I didn't know him at all. I'd never really crossed paths with him. I knew him briefly because he was writing for the WWF magazine as Vic Venom. When I was Aldo. We knew each other very briefly. I have a few of them
up there.
Yeah, definitely.
But dude, he's one of the kindest, most gentle souls, and he gets a horrible rap. And he says it. He goes, dude, I get it. I wrote some really bad television at times. He admits it, in WCW and even in TNA. He goes, but I should not be demonized for writing bad TV. He goes, we try, we fail at times, but he's also written some good stuff as well. So I just think we've gotten to, I don't know if it's just the way it happened, if it's,
losing the pissing contest between Vince and Vince Russo and the other people around, the Meltzers, the Cornettes. I don't know. It's what wrestling has become. I think we have learned to focus more on that kind of stuff than, once again, on storylines, on what really matters. Like the wrestling subculture, honestly, gathers a lot more attention, I feel, than the in-ring product, right?
Hmm.
If you think about it, we're sitting here talking about Vince Russo when he hasn't had anything on television in how many years? Like it's preposterous. Like we should honestly be focusing on how do we make WWE better? How do we make AEW better? I mean, it's just, I think we just love as fans, and even I do too. I'm guilty of it. It's a guilty pleasure. We love to like watch the car crash and to comment about it. So I mean, I don't know, man. I think we have a lot of people that could really help this business. And I just know that he knows how to pace television. His ideas may not always be the best, but he knows how to put people in positions to succeed. Like he tells me stuff sometimes, like for example, like how would he write a certain segment he saw on Raw? And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Or just different ideas. And, and the thing that kills me is I think he's more qualified than I'm sure a lot of the writers that have never written for wrestling, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's very few writers out there that have written wrestling shows. And I think that's where WWE makes a big mistake is they're going for Hollywood guys where they don't necessarily understand, the history of Dusty Rhodes or Ric Flair or Terry Funk. And I think that's what the real fans would like to see is more of that all-encompassing, like how refreshing would it be to see a package of how great Dusty and Terry Funk was one day, like a Legends review on Raw. That would be pretty dope, you know what I mean? Like maybe to promote their network. I think real wrestling fans would really enjoy to see our history, the history of the business we love, being put over and then kind of bring it back to the current, stock and crop of talent. We don't use that, like the past is the past. And I think we don't revisit it enough because I used to love watching like Warrior, Hogan, Steamboat, Jake, and we just don't see that enough. You know what I mean? Just like give them 5 minutes of, like a retro thing, just to watch. It would be great, dude.
See, I would say this about Russo in that I feel that they want to emphasize a lot of his mistakes, let's say. But, I look at it like like a home run hitter in baseball. Most of the top home run hitters also, led the league in strikeouts. But they get remembered for the good. They get remembered for the hits.
Yeah.
To me, someone like Vince Russo, I think, would be an asset right now because at least he tried. Even if he tried and failed, it's better than the writer who's just there collecting a paycheck, doing the status quo, trying to go unnoticed because, God forbid, they upset the 74-year-old billionaire that gives them money every week. But then we get shows like, Raw, and I watch Raw every week. But, we'll get a show that'll have 20-minute matches because a writer's too lazy to write segments that might engage the person switching through the channels. The majority of the matches are very, we don't want to get injured here. We just also want to collect our paycheck and, manage to skirt on by and go unnoticed. And it's what leads to it being a bad show. When you have all these other things on TV, all these other top-rated shows, and you're competing against it, and you're putting on this PG kids show with little to nothing because we're too scared to upset the apple cart, this is why we end up with as low of a rating there, and it's not pulling anyone in. I would gladly take Vince Russo's WCW, which I personally found was way more entertaining than the previous WCW that did well in the ratings, because it was entertaining. And at the end of the day, the show is entertainment. It's literally in their name, World Wrestling Entertainment, but it's not freaking entertaining.
No.
I would take that over what they're doing now, and I think that, as he said, the more help they could get, they can pool their knowledge and they can filter out whatever is not good, but it'll at least be better than a boring show that no one cares about and no one's watching.
Like Vince can't look back and look at like 96, 97 and be like, wow, it worked working with Vince. I wonder if we could do it again. Like, I don't know how Vince is. You've had a relationship with him, but does he strike you as that type?
I just think Vince has lost his mind. I mean, he's 70, what is he, 74, 75 years old? He's been doing this for a living forever. I just think he doesn't know could you imagine living your entire professional career having people bow down to you and tell you yes?
Yeah.
And literally, like, you know what I mean? Literally depend on you and your company for a living. You know, I don't think that man has had an honest, that's why he couldn't get along with the guys like Jim Cornette or Paul Heyman, because those guys, or Bill Watts, because those guys would just tell them to F off. You know, I honestly, and I don't know what their relationships were, but I could just tell that there is not a creative bone in the WWE body right now, honestly. And I love WWE. I love everything that they've done, but this is the most uninspiring work ever. You know what I mean? It's like this generation. And again, I don't know who to blame anymore. I certainly isn't the talent, because they have the Bray Wyatts and, you know, and the Drew McIntyres and so many others. I mean, I could go on and on. The ladies are all fantastic, but it's like, I don't want to watch. It almost nauseates me, dude, because I know I'm going to see nothing. There's not going to be anything risque or anything dangerous or anything worth investing my time into at all, you know. And quite frankly, none of pro wrestling is right now, you know. And
Because they're afraid to shock us.
AEW is watching an indie show on TNT. You know, they have, their matches are way too long. Like their opening match this past Wednesday night was, God, let me get it right. It was oh my God, it was a tag team match with.
I just watched it yesterday.
It was a 6-man. It was Hangman Page, Dark Order.
I think it was like
Hangman Page, Dark Order against who were they?
Matt Hardy and the Hardy Party.
Hardy and Private Party.
That's right. Yeah, Private Party and Matt Hardy against the two guys from Dark Order and Hangman Page. Bro, 14 minutes and 50 seconds or something like that, and it's a joke. It's a joke. I don't want to watch anybody wrestle for that long. None of those guys are over. Matt Hardy, poor guy. They should be doing so much more with Matt. And I mean, it's like, I don't even know who Private Party are. You know, the other guys from the Dark Order, John Silver and the other dude, it's like, you know, Brody Lee was supposed to be your boss. He's not there anymore. He lost to John Moxley, and he hasn't been seen in almost a month. There's no vignettes. There's no nothing to kind of tell me what's going on. Why do I care? You just killed a quarter hour of primetime television with nobody. You know what I mean? You advanced nothing, sold me on nobody. You just did a bunch of flips and a bunch of spots. That's great. You know, and it keeps going. And that's the formula. It goes on and on and on. You've been bragging about Sting for 3 weeks. Sting comes on the show. You got Taz and his crew talking a bunch of smack to him, and Sting says 2 or 3 words and does nothing for 3 weeks in a row. Yeah. It's like, you know, shouldn't you have Sting kind of give you a reason why he's in AEW? Why is a 61-year-old Steve Borden coming on this broadcast? I'm sure you could think of something compelling, saying like, well, you know, I kind of started this TNT wrestling thing, and I'm going to finish my career here. And, you know what I mean? And then kind of try to connect the dots with Darby Allin, and, you know, because that's where obviously they're going. Just something. Like, give me something. They're just not. They're just kind of throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Well, what was the point of his appearance on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Like, he didn't do anything. Like you said, Taz and all his goons were there. He literally comes out, he's in front of them, doesn't say a word, leaves.
Yeah, it's very uninspiring where, you know, they have so much of an opportunity. And I know that the fact that Tony Khan writes the shows, here's a man who's it's not even about writing good wrestling shows. He's never written episodic television. And I've been in the business 30 years. I don't know how to write episodic wrestling television. It's very difficult if you really want to take that job seriously. I don't have the credentials. How does a guy like Tony Khan have credentials to do it? You need a team. You need people that know. And, you know, I just think everybody's in that for the paycheck. They're happy getting AEW is happy getting 800,000 viewers. They're happy with their spot. Everybody's getting paid. Everybody's buddies are getting paid. And that's what it is, really. And now, you know, I ain't mad at you, but just call a spade. You know?
And I mean, do you feel that AEW, as is right now, they could overtake a show like Monday Night Raw because they're killing them in the demographic right now?
I don't think they could have killed the show as of yet. but man, they had an opportunity to do something. They really they have the infrastructure with the promotion, with TNT. I just don't think they have the proper vision. They have the wrestlers, they have all the talent in the world. I just don't think they have the vision for it. I don't think that it's going to take one wrestler or two wrestlers. It's going to take some kind, you know what I mean? Like something different. I don't know what it is, but a collective of just a different brand. Like the way one thing AEW does very well is they did that little promo series saying that they're boundless. Have you seen that one? They have like this little 60-minute infomercial kind of thing saying that, where Cody's talking and they show clips, shot cinematography style, saying that AEW is boundless in their, and guys doing all these nice high spots and really dramatic looking stuff. If they could actually capture that in a 2-hour show, that would be great, but they don't. They're kind of, they say they're all these things, but at the end of the day, they're indie wrestling on steroids, where, I always thought of a good wrestler like, well, all right, here's what I'll say. I was 19 years old. I first went into the WWE locker room. I met Ted DiBiase. He was 6'3", 240 pounds. And on television, he did not look that big. No. And I thought to myself, what a monster of a man. I was like, this guy would kill me in 2 seconds. And he's not even a big guy, like on TV looking. But he was
one of the smaller ones.
He looked like a real rough and tough guy, and if you saw him in a bar, you would not want to mess with him. That to me was pro wrestling, right? The tough guys that, you know what I mean, could beat you up if you were in a fight with them. Now you look at AEW, you see guys that are 6'3", pale white, 140 pounds soaking wet, but they're good acrobats, but they don't look like, anything that to me resembles what I loved about pro wrestling. The Steve Austins of the world, the Triple H's, the Rocks, even the HBKs. Remember when HBK was the smallest guy in the business? Even guys like Bret Hart. So I don't know. I think they need to get back to something along those lines. Am I losing you guys?
Guys, are you hungry? Do you like cannolis? It's that time of year. Usually you got that lady at the office who brings all the goodies. Well, guess what? She's dead. COVID got her. I got your hookup for cannolis. I got the cannoli boss over at Balboa Bakery. You're going to want to head over to 102 Saint Jean Baptiste, local 52 in Chateauguay. He will hook you up. Tell him Jofo in the ring sent you.
That's right. He's going to give you all the sweets you're looking for. It don't matter if you got diabetes, you got high cholesterol. This stuff might just kill you. But you know what? You're going to die in style, and it's going to taste damn good. So go check out Balboa Bakery. That's where it's at. All right, folks. So as you can see, things are a little bit different here. We experienced some technical difficulties, but we're still here, live and in living color. And I got the man, Just Incredible, back on the line. So we're about to jump head first right back into it. I believe we left off talking about wrestlers maybe not looking as credible, if you will, these days than in days gone by. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, times change, the business changes, but I just feel that from a lot of standpoints, I think wrestlers don't look like the wrestlers that maybe I grew up on, maybe you grew up on as well, because back in the 80s and 90s, the wrestlers I grew up loving were a lot bigger. They were in a lot better shape than a lot of, sometimes you watch AEW, and I hate to bust on them all the time, but, I feel like, they look like young kids that aren't athletes with wrestling gear. They're very skinny and they don't hit the gym and stuff like that. So I would like to see more of, more of these guys looking like real athletes. Size doesn't really concern me, but, look the part as well,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've always been a firm believer that, and I think it was maybe Jimmy Hart that I heard say the quote where he said, if you look like the people in the audience, you belong with the people in the audience. And I think that for the longest time, we've been letting too many people behind the curtain who maybe don't have all the tools. Not to say they can't get it done in the ring, but in any walk of life, to be a professional, it involves a certain level of commitment,
Yep.
as much commitment to the craft in the ring as to what you present. You know, I've always been someone where I say, I want to be able to have the audience look at me and say, you know what, I'm not going to stand in that guy's path of rage. That guy will eat me alive. You know, I see him walking down a dark alley. I ain't going to mess with him. And it's not always how big you are, but it's the presence that you have with you. It's how you present yourself. And it's a violent sport. So I don't ever want someone sitting in the audience to think they can handle me. If they do, you know, they're welcome to try, but it ain't going to end up good for them. But
Right.
yeah, I totally
No,
feel
go
where
ahead.
you're
I'm
coming
sorry.
from.
Yeah,
No,
and then also, you know, you could tell you know, guys that look like stars, and it might not even be, you know, muscles, but a guy like Lance Archer, who's 6'7" or something. He has that mohawk ponytail, and he has the size, and he looks scary. Like, you know, I wouldn't want to get into a fight with him anywhere, you know, in a bar or, like you said, in a dark alley. So you don't have to be all muscled up, but look, you know, like Jimmy Hart. That's a wonderful thing that he said is, you know, you should look the part, you know.
yeah, definitely. And I've actually been in the ring with Lance Archer, and I can tell you he's as legit as they come.
Yeah.
Actually wrestled him on SmackDown for WWE ages
Oh,
back.
wow.
Yeah, when they were giving him a chance. Well, to say giving him a chance there, they didn't really give him much of a chance because clearly there's a lot of potential there, and I think he could have done a lot of good business, a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, whatever might have happened, politics, who knows? But it's the kind of thing where now he's been given a chance to show off his talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had the opportunity to work for a lot of those companies, you know, WWE, ECW. I don't think we really got to scratch the surface of going back to WWE, but we had talked a bit about before. Maybe you could shed some light on how that came about that took you back to WWE.
Sure. ECW had gone out of business, and this was also the time where you know, WCW was pretty much going out of business. So really, there was all these, you know, full-time jobs that were gonna not exist anymore in professional wrestling, and there's only a handful of full-time jobs out there, period, anyways. So it was, you know, that opportunity was going to dry up quickly. So I emailed Jim Ross, and I got lucky. You know, they were interested, and you know, I was brought in. I signed a 3-year contract with them in 2001, I believe, to do the X Factor tag team with Sean Waltman.
Yep. And it was definitely a good run. I think they also brought in Albert with you guys
Yep.
at one point. It was short-lived because I think the Invasion ended up happening
Right.
after.
Yeah.
Do you feel to a certain extent with the Invasion happening, you came in with a decent amount of impact, but then that might have got lost in the shuffle because they had this huge influx of talent from WCW and even some others from ECW. What was that like for you?
It was very frustrating because Sean and I were, you know, we were scheduled to get a title run, you know, with the tag team titles, and I thought we were a mid-sized heel tag team. You know, X-Pac had a lot of heat with the fans, and I thought if we were given, you know, we had a good feud with the Dudleys and stuff like that, and the Hardys we worked with. But if we were given a little more time, we would have been, you know, we would have done well. But they hot shot the, you know, the Invasion angle, and of course I went with ECW, and then that same night they made it the Alliance with WCW. So yeah, just you know, all that talent, you know, you tend to get lost in the shuffle, you know.
And you'd think that they would have appreciated it more that, you know, you made the jump back to them before they became the only game in town. So
Right.
you'd think that kind of loyalty should, to a certain extent, be rewarded. But as we've come to see with them, there's always, you know, the new toy for creative. Oh, we have these guys. Now we have, you know, an influx of guys from WCW. We got to find them a spot. We got to find the you know, RVD, Tommy Dreamer, the other ECW guys. So I can imagine how frustrating that would be. One other thing, and you and I had talked about this ages back, was the change in your attire too, going from the jean shorts to the black and silver tights. I don't feel a lot of fans know the story behind that, and I was surprised when you told me that this wasn't, if I'm not mistaken, this wasn't something that was imposed on you. This was your decision, right?
Yeah, it was. Hunter mentioned it to me because I was driving with me and X-Pac were driving with him, and this wasn't. This was before Stephanie. Although they were seeing each other behind closed doors, he had suggested that we look more like a tag team. You know, more cohesive. So, you know, and I figured it was about time if we were going to be doing a tag team, because I wore jean shorts for a little bit during that run, but then I wanted to switch over so we could both look more like a unit. So, you know, I did that, and I actually enjoyed it. You know, I worked in tights as Aldo, and my whole career, before then. So I enjoyed that, and I thought it was, it just made it look more professional. And if we're going to be a tag team, try to look like a tag team.
Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of tag team experience, because I remember, well, obviously going back to when you were Aldo Montoya, they had you team with Sean Waltman.
Yep.
But also one of the high points, I think, of your career was the Impact Players teaming with
Yes.
Lance Storm.
Yep.
And you had mentioned, and I didn't even know this till we did the interview, that you and Lance go way back to your training
Yep.
in Calgary.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us about that. What was it like teaming with Lance Storm and forming the Impact Players?
Oh, it was great. I mean, we were in both of us were in a great part of our careers. And, I was helped, Lance pretty much helped train me. He was one of the first people I met in the wrestling business up in Calgary. So, it was a natural fit. And, in ECW, he was much more, he was always known to be quiet, even like his mannerisms, his promos, etc. And I was a little more of a showman in ECW. So Impact Players worked, in my opinion, because it's almost like what he didn't possess as far as showmanship, I helped bring it out of him. And as far as, even though I'm a decent technical wrestler, he brought a little bit of that flavor out of me, and incorporated in the matches. So we just had a real nice blend. It's like we each added to each other instead of take away. And it just blended real nice. And we trusted each other. We were friends, which of course, always helps when you're doing a team. And I think that's why it was so effortless and successful,
I mean, if I have to pitch in my own little editorial view on that, I enjoyed that. I feel you brought a lot out of Lance, even in the promos that you would do. There was a lot of personality and intensity that would come out, and it seemed like you guys had very good chemistry on screen and in the ring. I mean, it goes without saying, you guys were an awesome tag team. No disrespect to X Factor.
Sure.
The way I look at it is that, they had you and Lance at the same time in WWE. His career, it had some ups and downs. I think they really did him dirty when they had Austin go out there and do that promo and say he's boring, which was really offensive to a guy who's such a good performer that if you watched him in any other company, here's a guy you could give the ball to, built like a brick outhouse, and natural too, which I always, appreciated that he would say, he's the best built athlete this side of a positive drug test. And had really a lot of the tools. As much as they wanted to say that he was boring, I think they just didn't understand Lance and didn't use him in a proper way. But what I'm getting at is that I think they could have had money on the table there if they would have paired you guys up as the Impact Players in WWE. And what I'd like to know on your end was that ever something that got discussed or not?
One time we, because both of us weren't doing much inside of the Alliance, and in Chicago, one time, Lance and I teamed, not as the Impact Players, although we did the pose and we did all the stuff that went along with it, against Edge and Christian for Monday Night Raw. And, there was no mention of the Impact Players, nothing like that. I don't know if that was a test. I don't think it was a test run of it or anything like that. I just think, they just happened to put us together. I don't know if maybe Paul Heyman had suggested it to give Edge and Christian a good match. But it just we were hoping that it led to more, and it was just a shame that it didn't come to fruition because against those guys, against the Hardys, it would have been ridiculously good, And it just goes to show you, they had an abundance of talent, but also B, they really didn't have much of a clue of what they were doing. I mean, not too many people out there would skip the opportunity to put the Impact Players together and have them work with Edge and Christian, with the Hardys, the Dudleys, whomever, was there at the time. That would have been, plenty of great matches and new and fresh matches that I think wrestling fans, of course, would have appreciated. So it just showed a bit of arrogance. It's like if it wasn't WWE made, they weren't going to put it over,
Yeah, and I think it also speaks to how, in a game of chess, you got to look at the whole board. You got to know the tools that you have. And I think that maybe creative was just so in the WWE bubble and the WWE mindset. And like you said, if it's not a product that we created, then, it doesn't matter. Our audience doesn't know that, not knowing that, there were millions upon millions of people watching wrestling, an audience that's actually disappeared because the WWE has lost more fans than almost any other than pretty much any other professional sport in the world. So, again, it speaks to the arrogance. So, yeah, speaking of tag teams, one of the times that I saw you wrestle live, was actually here in Montreal, and it was a SmackDown taping, and it was a pretty big match for you. You teamed with Raven to take on Chris Jericho and The Rock.
Oh, I remember that match. Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty huge. The match, I mean, it wasn't that long itself, but it was still pretty cool for me as a fan to be there live to see you take on those two.
So I'd known him from Calgary, and of course, I got to work with them with X Factor because we had a bunch of matches where it was me and X-Pac against, we called it the Chris's. It was when Benoit and Jericho were tag teaming. So we did a bunch of matches with them. So, yeah, I'd known Chris for a long time, and I think that match, even though they didn't announce it, they announced it over the, I think over the house mic, but it didn't make television. I think it was a DQ win for Raven and myself. So technically, because I think Jericho hit Rock with the chair, there's some kind of DQ finish. So technically, I hold a win over those two.
Yeah, and I was there. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they imploded because they had the promo earlier in the night, and then the crowd was really hot for it. In fact, it wasn't announced even to the live crowd. So when they came out, I actually thought they were going to have a one-on-one match. And then
I see.
Raven's music hits right after, and you guys come out. So, I mean, that was really cool for me, being that I was a big fan of ECW. So you see Chris Jericho on a weekly basis on AEW, still going strong at his age. You know, what must that be like for, you know, a veteran like yourself to see him still going, wrestling young talent and main eventing, and I guess drawing huge ratings as well for AEW in the right demographic?
Yeah, I think it's great. I'm happy for Chris. I've always loved Chris. He's a uniquely talented guy. I mean, he spans generations, you know, and he's been in this business. I think he's got 3 years on me because he's got 2.5 years on me. He started in 90. I started in 92. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I could get there if I wanted to have those kinds of matches. It's just, you know, I just lost that passion to stay in shape that it takes to wrestle at that level. I'm blessed that I'm not injured. I just would find that it would probably be harder and harder to recover from those kinds of matches with those young guys. But I'm sure in the right situation I could pull that off. But I think those days are a bit behind me.
So, I mean, let's say there was a deal on the table, for example, and they want to bring you in to do a great hardcore match, let's say, with a guy like Darby Allin, you know, maybe help to get him to the next level, you know, or even to work with maybe like a Joey Janela. You'd be open to an offer like that from them?
I mean, absolutely. I would definitely have to get in better shape, that's for sure. But, you know, nothing's out of the question. I just, I don't want to kid myself and think that there's you know what I mean, that there's an offer out there if I would just get in shape. You know, I'm pretty sure that those days have passed, but you never, you know, in wrestling, you never can tell. And of course I would accept any kind of, you know, I'd look into something like that, no doubt.
Well, it's no doubt that wrestling is a young man's game, clearly, but there are many exceptions to the rules, and we've seen that quite a bit now. And one person that comes to mind is someone that you actually faced that challenged you for the ECW championship, and a good friend of mine who I've had the chance to work very closely with as of late, former Ring of Honor champion just recently, Pierre Ouellet, PCO.
Yeah.
You had one hell of a match with him in ECW, and hopefully my producer man over here can find it and we can maybe splice some images in. But that match, to me, it was one of the first matches I saw on TV on TNN with ECW once we finally got access to it here in Canada. And just an amazing match. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm sure Carl would love to hear that too.
Oh, I mean, I love Carl. Carl's always been a good friend of mine. I knew him from back in the days of Pierre, you know, the Quebecer, and worked with him then. I worked with him when he did the pirate gimmick as well in the WWE. So him and I go way back, and he was always so kind to me and so good to me. You know, it was a pleasure working with him in ECW. Pleasure.
I still think that to this day, one of the best false finishes I've ever seen in a match. And going into that, I mean, I never thought that he was going to come in and realistically beat you, even though he was coming off of, I think, his hardcore title run in WCW at the time. But when he hit you with that top rope pile driver,
yes.
I really believed that he had absolutely killed you with that move, that it was going to be a shoot finish. You know, even if he wasn't scheduled to go over, that move looked like absolute death. And I would put that up there with the greatest false finishes of any match I've ever seen. And I guess it really speaks to how good of a performer he is. that he looks like he could kill the opponent, and he takes quite a bit of punishment himself too.
He does, yeah.
And I've noticed, I've had the chance to do 2 or 3 matches with him, but worked with him a lot, that's one of his strengths, is that he's willing to put his body on the line and take punishment for the sake of making the match good and memorable.
Yeah. He's amazing. He's amazing to work with too. I mean, like you said, he'll hurt himself rather than hurt you. I mean, he's a total pro in there, man. I went to Paul Heyman and I wanted to bring him in on a full-time basis. Like I said, Carl and I go way back, and he's always been so good to me. And I think he's one of the most talented pro wrestlers out there. So he's amazing. He's amazing, and he always took great care of me in the ring. Never hurt me.
Yep. And I think now he just had a birthday recently. I think he's somewhere around maybe 53, 54.
Wow.
Still one of the top performers in Ring
God
of Honor.
bless him. Yeah.
They just had the Final Battle pay-per-view a little while back. And in my opinion, he had the best match on that show.
Nice.
Still going strong, still innovating, still wanting to do more. And I think that's been a strength of his, much like Chris Jericho, where they want to continue to keep up with the Joneses, if you will, being able to still be relevant and still go with the best in the world.
Yeah.
With that said, talking about, matches throughout your career, at any point, was there maybe a match that, like one that got away? Like where the stars were aligned, they could have done this, and you didn't get to work with this person, and who would that be?
Oh, geez. I mean, I guess the only real person that it never came close to happening, but it would have been Ric Flair, of course. I think everybody has that anybody that loves this business would love to do that. I mean, I had the opportunity to work with Scott Hall in ECW. I even had the opportunity of working with Shawn Michaels in the WWF as Aldo. It was one day Razor didn't make one of the shows. I think it was up in Buffalo, and I filled in for him for the IC title. So I got a lot of my dream matches, but I never got Flair. So that would have been the one.
I'd like to say there's still time, but I think it's in everyone's best interest if Rick maybe stays out of the ring now.
Yeah, I think he's good.
Good. And so, talking about dream matches and those kinds of matches, I actually recently watched the Scott Hall ECW adventure there that had happened. I saw he had a match with Big Sal Graziano.
Yep.
Was very. I'd never seen that. I'd heard about it, but watching it, was pretty good. Clearly, Scott came in to do some good business. He mentioned you. And what must that have been like? Because that was at a time where I think he had just kind of exited from WCW, and he never really made it back, but he did find a place very briefly in ECW. Was that planned out from the start, or did things just kind of fall into place?
They just kind of fell into place. I was like, I was close with Scott. I've always been close with Scott. And I was like, yo, man, you want to come work with me? I was the world champion at the time. I had a little bit of stroke, and, ECW was known for stuff like that. And plus we got to work in Poughkeepsie at the old Mid-Hudson Civic Center, where we did a lot of our Monday Night Raws at the time, where that $10,000 match he had with the 1-2-3 Kid famously took place in that building. So, that's it was kind of like the building and the stars aligned, and he didn't take a payday that time either. He came in and flew himself in, and just wanted the experience to work in ECW and to work with his friend. And it was just a cool thing. We just did it to for the love of the game, to just say we did it.
Yep, pretty cool. And in terms of other matches that you've had throughout your career, lesser known matches, and I know this one, not a lot of people know it because it was a dark match. I only know it because I was there live. But I think you actually did the first match in WWE for one of our local wrestlers here, Sylvain Grenier, who would go on to be one half of La Resistance. I actually met you briefly that day, just out in the parking lot. You happened to be there wearing a Detroit Red Wings jersey.
Oh, God.
Vivid memory in my mind. And I do hope to have Sylvain on here at some point, but I know he's personally told me that match had helped him get signed. And from what I remember, it was a really good match. In fact, when you were outside in the parking lot, the fans were giving it to you, the ones who knew that match was going to happen, and saying, our local boy, he's going to beat you. He's going to, the heat was already there. And anytime you wrestle a guy from Montreal, in Montreal, crowd's going to be rowdy. But you guys had the place. I remember that match very vividly. I doubt there's any footage that exists, but you had a great sequence of near falls towards the end. and I was really believing that he was gonna get the win on you. You know, like I mean, obviously you were the contracted guy. You don't usually see the guy lose in the dark match, but it really seemed like he was going to get you that day. And the crowd actually gave the match a standing ovation once it was done, despite the fact that the local guy lost.
Right.
Maybe any insight you could share on us as to how that match came together?
I was always very close with Pat Patterson. Pat and I had a wonderful relationship, and that night, Pat kind of said, you know, PJ, I want you to go out there and work with this kid and do the best you can for him. You know, because I think Pat was looking to, you know what I mean, to do something with him, and you know, I think he needed a good showing, and of course, I would do anything for Pat. You know, he's always helped me. You know, with my matches, just with everything, so much knowledge. So, you know, I just, you know, he helped me with some ideas, and we just put it together. And he was a very, very nice guy, and I had a great time working with him. You know, I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic match. Like I said, it's a shame that the footage doesn't exist because
Was it in Montreal?
Oh yeah, it was at the Bell Center. It was the
Okay.
first match on the card.
On
Like
the
you guys
card,
were
yeah.
literally the first wrestling they saw. And even I was a little jaded to the match because I'm like, okay, well, it's a foregone conclusion. You're going to win. I don't know who this guy is. Yeah, he's from here, but whatever. You know, I must have been, I don't know. Yeah, I was
just a bit of a sidebar to that story. At that night, me, Chris Jericho, Pat Patterson, and The Rock went out to karaoke that night in Montreal, right from the building, because Pat loves to sing karaoke. So that night, we all went out, just so you know.
Yeah, that must have been at the old Vocals karaoke bar. He was a staple of that establishment. He may have even had some ownership in it, if I'm not mistaken.
Very good.
I think there may be some pictures from that night of you guys up on stage singing.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm sure we could dig those up maybe. But yeah, it was a well known, and Pat definitely loved to sing. We recently lost him, which is, you know, it's pretty sad. Obviously, you know, everybody dies at some point, but Pat was a great mind and impacted tons of careers. I've very rarely heard anyone say that they've crossed paths with Pat in a working capacity and that he didn't somehow influence them, you know, help make them a better performer. Even I myself, in dealing with him, because he would come to a significant number of shows here, especially the ones put on by Sylvain, I had the chance to cross paths with him. He helped me a lot, helped, you know, open doors for me as well, which not a lot of people have done in this business.
Sure.
And had a huge impact on my career. But I think that he was one of the all-time great minds in professional wrestling. And I don't feel the world will ever really know how much of an impact he had and how many careers he helped. From your perspective, I mean, what can you tell us about Pat's influence on your career at the time?
Just, you know, he always liked me. He always spoke good about me. Something clicked with us, and he always liked to. It was similar to Scott Hall, I guess. He liked to help newer talent. You know, if he saw somebody that was, you know, that had some potential, he loved to work with them, and he liked to try to help mold them. And, you know, and Pat didn't have to do that. Pat normally would work only with like top guys, you know what I mean, and do the top matches. But he was just very helpful, and he'd give you an ear. And, you know, he was just always, I mean, sometimes he was grumpy, sometimes he was moody. He was tired, you know, of being there, working that schedule for so long. But he was just, you know, if you got to know him and, you know, gave him the time and the respect, he would help you out. And if you were sincere, too, he didn't like bullshitters. So he was just one of a kind. And I give him a lot of credit, too, because even 20 years ago, it's not 20 years, almost 20 years ago when I was there last, or at the time period we're talking about, homosexual wrestlers weren't really a thing, and not everybody could come out. And Pat really, you know, he was a very brave man for being openly gay in a very homophobic place at the time in pro wrestling. So he was a great man, you know, very great, brave man.
Mm-hmm. And obviously to have, you know, lasted that long, you know, with everything going on, we know that the wrestling environment isn't always the easiest one to navigate.
No.
And, you know, to be that close to the Vince's inner circle for so long, beloved by everybody, you know, he must have been incredible at what he did, and definitely brought a lot to the table. I think it's a huge blow to the wrestling business that he's no longer there, but his legacy is definitely going to live on.
Absolutely.
Wanted to also throw it back to another person you got to wrestle, I guess early on in his career in the WWE, was Dave Batista.
Yeah.
And obviously he'd go on to have a huge career, multiple-time WWE champion, huge movie star today too. Yep. You got to work with him early on. What was that like working with Dave?
Oh, it was great. I actually was, believe it or not, his first ever match on Monday Night Raw. That took place in Cleveland, Ohio. We'd actually worked that weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night at the house shows, and then we had the match on Raw on Monday. And Dave was green, but he listened, and he was so grateful. To this day, I have a relationship with Dave. He's so kind, and so he was just so happy that because some guys will, don't really have the guy's best interest. Sometimes they go out there and not work as hard as they maybe should to get guys over. I knew at that point in my career, and my position at that moment was to put him over and to make guys look good. And I know he recognized that early on. So we had a great relationship, and he was great to work with, man. Super cool, never hurt me. That always means a lot. I could say maybe I comfortably say this, in all the years I've wrestled, I've never hurt anybody. Not saying I never stiffed anybody, but like hurt someone, and very few people could say that. I think Bret Hart also prides himself in that. I don't know, maybe it's just a Calgary thing, but that's something I hold very dear. And Dave was one of those guys too that took care of you in the ring.
Well, that's definitely good to hear.
Yeah.
Now I want to take it back to, again, your entrance into WWE. A lot of people, myself included, kind of feel like maybe you weren't necessarily given the best chance upon coming in, and I feel a lot of that has to do with maybe, some of the things they took away from you. Like, you were known for using the tombstone.
Yep.
Obviously, with The Undertaker using the tombstone, I assume that was probably a no-no.
All right.
People want to point to your look with the jean shorts resembling Steve Austin a little bit, and that kind of being nixed. The super kick, and I mean, there was a time before Shawn Michaels came back, but obviously with Shawn there, suddenly they stripped you of that. So, was this an ongoing thing in WWE where like they would water down, they would cut down guys and be like, well, we have a guy here doing this already, so you can't do it, despite the fact that these were trademarks of yours when you were on top of the game, and some of these guys were sitting at home collecting a paycheck.
Yeah, very much so. I had a lot of that's going on, and it really, for Just Incredible to work, he also needs, for any character to work in wrestling, he needs the help of the booking, of creative, of the office, and I was a shell of Just Incredible. I didn't have the storylines that Paul Heyman had given me that made me cool. I certainly didn't have the look that I had in ECW, and just the way I was treated and handled. So, from the beginning, it was an uphill battle that I thought we could have overcome with X Factor. But the minute that became non-existent, I was just another body in a long list of wrestlers on the show, And the reason I even stayed as long as I did was because I was well-liked in the inner circle of the office, enough to keep me collecting a paycheck. But I also I worked every weekend and I worked really hard. So they, sometimes that's how it is, man. And I had to go ahead.
I was going to say, because I feel there was a time where you're right. You existed, but you were floundering around maybe on the C shows. The odds of us seeing you on a Raw and a SmackDown wasn't likely, even though maybe you were on Jacked or Metal or Sunday Night Heat, kind of wrestling and working. Was there ever a push maybe for something creative that didn't pan out, much like we talked about with the Impact players? There wasn't a day where they said, hey, we got this idea for you. Maybe you went to them with an idea. There was none of that?
Nope. Unfortunately, no.
So do you think this is something that maybe happens to a lot of talent, that they go there and then they find themselves in a rut where creative won't pull them out and they just kind of
exist?
Yeah,
it happened to Tommy Dreamer. It happened to Raven. It happened to a lot of those guys, and then you also come to the reality of, okay, do I stir the pot? And, where at that time, there was really nowhere else to go, in 2001, 2002, 2003, while I was there. So you really have no choice but to just take what you're given, Mm-hmm. So, there was that happened to a lot of us, unfortunately.
Not that he would have maybe had power at the time, but did Paul Heyman ever try to go to bat for any of his old ECW guys?
No, not really. Not really. You know, if he did, I didn't know about it. Because look what happened to Taz.
Mm-hmm.
Look what happened to Dreamer. You know what I mean? Look what happened to Raven. I think that Paul was just happy doing Paul. Everybody was out for themselves in the WWE. And which is a shame because I always felt that if they took the guys that they had there and let them be the way they were in ECW and perhaps book them the way they were booked in ECW, obviously if it worked for the hardest, smartest fans in the world, then it would work on a broader scale. They just were not willing to. That's, you know what I mean? It's not that it wouldn't have worked. They just weren't willing to. So,
And so ultimately you'd end up leaving the WWE.
Yep.
You did appear on a world stage a number of times after that. You did some stuff with TNA.
Yep.
I think you appeared for TNA on several occasions, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember. I feel there was a storyline you were involved in. I think possibly with Raven or maybe
Jerry Lynn. I did one with. I did a feud with Jerry Lynn, and I was involved with something with Raven and Sandman as well.
Yeah. And what was that atmosphere like working in TNA at the time? Because I think they were still fairly new.
Yeah, they were fairly new, but it was fun. It was fun. The money wasn't very good, but it wasn't bad either. And I was going to Japan. I was wrestling for All Japan for a little while there. So it was okay. I was making a living, So it wasn't too bad, but it certainly wasn't what TNA had become later on. It was still the infancy stages of the company.
Yeah. And do you watch Impact Wrestling even today?
I do not. No, unfortunately. I heard they have a pretty decent show these days, but I have not watched it.
Because, I mean, they have some of your old ECW brethren there. RVD was still wrestling there up until recently.
Yep.
Tommy Dreamer's on just about every week. Rhino's there.
Yep.
It almost seems like it could be a pretty good place, for you to maybe go and continue your career.
Not a chance. It's gonna take a stick of dynamite to get me back in that ring.
So one of the other things that I know had a bit of a buzz on the internet were these stories about when you had taken a job at Olive Garden, and that kind of caused a stir. Again, I don't know why people would see that as a negative thing. Obviously, everyone wants to earn a living somehow, honestly as well. And I think that was maybe in the early stages of social media and dirt sheets becoming popular. What was that like for you?
It was embarrassing. I mean, look, I don't know what people think professional wrestlers make, but it's not as much as they think. And for sure, I never made the kind of money where I could say F you. I made good money. I made six figures, but you also have bills, and the money you save goes away quickly if you're not making it. So I wanted to be a chef. I was going to culinary school, and why not work in a kitchen if that's what you want to do? So, but I found it very disheartening, and I had Marks calling the restaurant, asking to talk to me, and it was just a huge distraction and very, very ridiculous and disgusting, quite frankly. It's like, what am I not supposed to work ever again? Believe me, many people have real jobs outside the business, and a lot of wrestlers, unfortunately, because of that, get stuck in not wanting to get a job and end up going into, even myself to this day, I had such a bad experience with that, almost getting tortured and made fun of, that at this time I'm unemployed, looking for work, but I won't take work anywhere where the public can see me. And that's kind of stupid, I have a family to feed, and I can't feed it on wrestling right now because of COVID and a lot of other things. So it's ridiculous and stupid, and fans should be a lot more sensitive to that particular situation,
Yep. I think the problem is that, and I'm always one to speak about the reality of wrestling that not a lot of people know, and that people, and maybe wrestlers to a certain extent, they want to carry themselves as being larger than life and whatnot.
Right.
But at a certain time, the fan has to also realize the reality that this is a human being, no different than you, despite the fact that they appear or have appeared on a bigger stage or on your television set, and that life goes on. One of the things I always talk about here, and maybe it's a bit of the cultural diversity because we're Canadian, and obviously the wrestling scene is a little bit bigger in the United States, but even something as simple as healthcare, which we're blessed with here on this side of the border, but to be a wrestler in the United States of America, you're risking injury
Right.
every time you wrestle, let alone every time you train even.
Yeah.
And it's such a huge risk. I, for one, would maybe have second thoughts about actually becoming a professional wrestler,
Sure.
knowing that an injury could set you back so much. We
Yeah.
can maybe talk about injuries in your career, but we all get bumps and bruises doing this kind of thing, and it's just something that people always have to be mindful of, especially young wrestlers out there.
Yeah.
No, in addition to having bills to pay, having a
Yeah.
family to support, and maybe a lot more wrestlers should be looking into alternative sources of revenue to
Absolutely.
supplement their wrestling as they, try to make it to the top. But unfortunately, maybe the fans aren't aware of this kind of thing and know that these are human beings at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
that, life goes on.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I only only in the past 2 years have I had health care ever
Wow.
since I was 18 years old. So a lot of the times I was, I was out there wrestling, and I was blessed to never have any serious injuries. I never broke anything, never needed surgery. The worst thing, I mean, that I've had were concussions, which are pretty bad. But yeah, only for the past 2 years or so that I've had actual health care. So that just comes to show you, how much of a gamble it is. But fans don't care. Unfortunately, they are more interested in making fun of people when they fall on, not even hard times, just different times than they're aware of. I mean, I think, when we, it's like anything else. It's like if an actor used to be famous as a child and then, later on he's doing something different with his life. It's like, look, life changes, life moves on. And, fans are just a little more cruel these days, especially with social media.
Yeah, well, like I've seen the quote where social media just, it makes people comfortable with being able to speak their mind and, not having to get punched in the face because of it.
Exactly.
But, a lot of
It
these
is what
fans,
it is.
yeah, I doubt a lot of them would say a lot of the things they say online to people's faces. And
No,
if
they
they
wouldn't.
would, the outcome would definitely be a lot different in most cases.
Yeah,
Nevertheless,
absolutely.
it's good to hear that you, like me, have had a career, that's been, for the most part, injury-free.
Yeah.
I myself, 15 years going, no
Nice.
bumps and bruises, no concussions, nothing like that.
Good for
But
you.
injuries are a very real part of the sport, and I don't feel enough people talk about injuries and the consequences and healthcare and these kinds of things. I kind of try to be a bit of a harbinger of truth when it comes to this, to let people know this
Sure.
is the reality of professional wrestling, not just the comedy shows you see on TV.
Right.
It's a brutal sport. With that said, in your career, I'm sure you've encountered injuries and taken a fair amount of chair shots, these kinds of things. Have you been following any of the research that's been done with regards to CTE and these kinds of things and concussions?
I have, yeah.
And I've been following it too, and it's quite shocking. All the amounts of damage that we didn't know, or even people in football didn't know, because
Right.
they're all being diagnosed with it too. And it's the downside of doing a contact sport. Do you feel that the business has evolved for the better now that they've cut down on the chair shots to the head? And
Oh,
things like,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just this simple fact. I remember, I would say 1998, 99, around there. I was wrestling Jerry Lynn in Buffalo, New York, and it was a Thursday night. I got a concussion, blackout, complete concussion. Was throwing up, cross-eyed, the whole thing. Paul gave me Friday night off in Queens, New York, and then Saturday, a day after it happened, I had to wrestle Jerry Lynn in a 2 out of 3 falls match for about 30 minutes. And I remember watching the match back, and even on a simple roll, I would hold my head. There was so much dizzying pain. I remember driving home, having to pull over every 10, 15 minutes to throw up. Just different. It was different, man. Even in the WWE, that stuff would happen where they put you right back out there. So I'm glad for the men and women doing it today that has changed. And it is better. It is better. The situations in the work environment in that aspect is much better than it was, let's say, 15 years ago.
Mhm. No, it's good to see, and it's good to see at least in WWE that they do have an active wellness policy,
Yes.
taking care of their talent. Because without talent, there is no WWE, there's no wrestling.
Yep.
So it's good to see the boys being taken care of. Do you feel that maybe they should, take it a step further and also implement a form of like pension plans, these kinds of things to take care of talent who've been there a long time down the line to make sure they're well taken care of?
I would love to see that. I think back, I want to get this right. I would say 2001, 2002, they had a financial package that they sent to us if we were interested as far as investing money and so forth. But it was done with a private equity company. It wasn't done through the office because, again, this is the catch. We're independent contractors.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for that to happen, which I think should, but that's a whole nother ball of wax, is making them actual employees, which a lot of politicians in America, including a senator that ran for was running for the Democratic bid to be president, Andrew Yang, to make pro wrestlers, or WWE employees, I should say, wrestlers, actual employees. So I think that should happen because, quite frankly, it's unfair. It doesn't work. And a lot of wrestlers, a lot of people don't know this, a lot of wrestlers that are making six figures, but not as, maybe $100,000. A lot of those people, we have to spend money on rental cars, on hotels, on food, and that's a tax write-off. But we're spending a lot of money on the road, and that $100,000 quickly shrinks down, and then you have to pay taxes on top of that. So at the end of the day, a lot of wrestlers don't even end up paying taxes and get in all kinds of trouble with the IRS because it's really, it doesn't make sense financially to, you know what I mean? So
Yep.
there's a lot of things that go along with it.
And as a footnote to fans out there who think that maybe this might only be, lower tier guys, even
no, it's
Ric
everybody.
Flair.
Yeah.
Even Ric Flair had his issues, and we know that he's made more money than probably you and I will in our entire lifetime from his wrestling endeavors. So it happens to the best of them. Yeah. And I think that it's something that, more people should be raising awareness of who, think that this business is just going to be glitz, glamour, and limelight.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm shooting from the hip here because I may have my facts wrong. I usually like to have my facts beforehand. But if I'm not mistaken, were you a part of the WWE-sponsored rehab at some point or another?
I was, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
On more than one occasion.
Okay. So, I mean, at least in that aspect, again, they take care of their talents. And I believe that's extended to talents that are past as well as present.
Yes.
For the rehab.
Yeah, as long as you've been under contract. Yeah.
Okay. And they took good care of you, I assume?
Oh, they took great care of me. I think they do it for several reasons. One, they do care for the talent to some degree, but I really think it ended up being more because of the deaths in wrestling from substance abuse, because I think it was also just kind of a media play because, if another wrestler dies that wrestled for Vince, he could say, well, we offered treatment, this, that, and the other thing, because, for a long time it wasn't available. So I think it was, I think there was double motivation there, but I can't say that they don't care about the guys and the gals, but, the publicity certainly didn't hurt as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like that's the way to get anything to move forward, even in this case, like with Andrew Yang, and I have been following what he's attempted to do, and it seems like, now with the recent election, he may have more of a foothold to implement some of the things that he's talked about doing. But yeah, clearly it's through media, it's through interviews like this, through saying things and getting people to hear it that puts the pressure on them. I like to call it the power of the public outcry, which it can't be ignored. I always like to say if you hear the people, you don't have to fear the people. So I think it might be a case of that happening. And speaking of sobriety, I imagine your sobriety is going well. Maybe you could give us an update on that.
I mean, I'm doing fine. I'm drug free. I'm alcohol free. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's all been roses, but it's certainly helped me cope with things. I think. I mean, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago that I went to treatment for alcohol last time, and it certainly helps. It helps educate you. It helps dry you out safely, because I think a lot of times, when you get stuck in that thing that is addiction, you're scared. You don't know how to stop. Sometimes it's dangerous or even deadly to stop cold turkey. So I'm glad that those programs are put there and implemented to really help people who otherwise probably could not get it.
And I remember seeing a video that you put out saying that this was going to be the last time. It was a very heartfelt video. I know you and I hadn't spoken for a long period of time, but I saw that, and I could see definitely that you wanted to get your life going in the right direction. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was an incident at an independent wrestling show, a battle royal, I think, or something like that.
It was something like that. Yeah, I had a couple too many, and it got blown out of proportion too. It wasn't even anything that serious. I just felt that the promoter kind of took it. I just kind of was having a good time, and they took it somewhere else. So it is what it is. I don't even, believe it or not, man. That stuff doesn't even cross my mind once, in years, because you can't. You know what I mean? That's the small stuff, comparatively speaking.
And so you have a few matches on tap that are booked. I know
Yes.
of one in February. That's
Yeah.
you're going to be taking on the Blood Hunter, who
Yes.
I've worked on a couple of shows with. That's going to be February 8th, I think, for SWE Fury, if I'm not mistaken.
Down in Texas. Yep.
Yep, down in Texas. And so, I mean, you still have a pretty active schedule. I mean, let's say, without COVID, how many matches were you doing?
I was doing probably once a week. Yeah, once a week, but you do it. I mean, but when I go out there for independent wrestling, it's certainly not at the level of a WWE or, you know what I mean, or an AEW or an Impact Wrestling. It's, I go out there, I'll have fun, I'll do my, you know what I mean, my greatest hits kind of a thing, and hit the showers. You know what I mean? So.
Yep. Well, I feel you're being modest because, I mean, I take it back to those many shows that we had done for IWE in Maine. And I remember there were many nights, you weren't going out there and just phoning it in. I remember one time where you worked with another wrestler, and you guys did a spot where you took the padding off of the ring. It was, I think you gave him, or you took a maneuver on the exposed wooden panels of the ring. And I remember seeing it, and I told you, you might not remember this, but I told you when you were debating, should I do this? Should I take this move? And I said, I mean, you don't have to. These people, they'd be happy with a super kick and a tombstone and a promo, and they'd all go home happy. Not to mention, I think that, no offense to the Fed, but they had drawn maybe 40, 50 people, clearly not the ECW arena in its prime here. But you were still going back and forth with me saying, no, but those people, we still gotta give them that match. I gotta give them that violence. I gotta give them what they came for. And that told me more about you than just about anything, because you wanted to give the people what they want.
Well, yeah, I still believe that. I just, there's certain ways to do it now. I think, I have a couple of tricks up my sleeve that I could do that may look a lot worse than it actually is, but I always do believe in giving the fans something good. You know what I mean? It's just maybe, maybe they don't notice it, but, I tried to take lesser bumps and, you know what I mean? Less risky stuff, but stuff that might
smarter work over harder work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. Good. And, to the younger wrestlers out there aspiring to make it, or even guys like me who are still aspiring to get that opportunity on a bigger stage, what would be some advice that you'd want to shoot their way?
Man, just study your craft. I mean, really, it's for a business that all about athletics and showmanship and really being at your peak. It's amazing that you don't get really good at it until a little bit after your prime physical years. Like, in football or baseball, guys are in their early 20s, late 20s when they peak because of, it's so physical and stuff. Whereas wrestling, it takes almost a decade to really master your craft, So just really focus on the basics. I always say to my Pro Wrestling 101s, it's very important. And know your way in and out of that ring, and just be the best professional you can be. And before before you go to moonsaults and all kinds of dives and crazy stuff, know your mat work in and out, know how to do things properly, like, how to hit the ropes properly and how to chain wrestle and just all that kind of good stuff. You want to be as crisp as you can be in all facets, not just the high spots and the flying around and stuff, which of course is an integral part of it. But it just get your basics down, because it's funny. That's what the WWE, I've learned, always looked for when they were watching tryout matches, were the basics, and Yeah, so I would say do that and stay safe, especially if you're just getting in the business, man. Stay safe and listen to your veterans.
Hmm. Yeah, no,
You know,
definitely. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And
absolutely,
longevity definitely goes a long way in this business.
sure does.
You mentioned Pro Wrestling 101. We had talked about it a bit in the first half of the interview. Maybe you could let the fans know, a little bit more about that and how they can find you and follow you, that kind of thing.
Sure. I have it. I have it in two formats. I have the original Pro Wrestling 101 on YouTube, video version. If you just go to YouTube, type in the search engine Pro Wrestling 101. I have about 25 to 30 5-minute clips of me talking about certain topics. And now, more recently, I'm doing a podcast over on the Realm Network associated with Vince Russo called Pro Wrestling 101. So it's on all the places you can get podcasts. Go over there and check that out. Just look for Pro Wrestling 101 wherever you get your podcasts. So check that out, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. I mean, I have checked out a couple of them, and there's great knowledge on there for anyone in the wrestling business. And I've sat under the learning tree with you on a number of occasions. I definitely think you have a lot to offer there. And now in the day and age of social media, it's so easy to get access to it. So I think that everyone should be jumping on that. You can learn from just about everybody in this business. So
Definitely.
I think it's a great opportunity there. So you had said you're doing the podcast with Vince Russo.
Yep.
I have caught a few of those. If ever he'd want a guest, to represent the Canadian independent scene, I'd love to jump on there because I think the world of Vince Russo, and I think that he's one of the few guys that had the balls to actually stand up to Vince McMahon and say, look, it's time that this business changes, which is kind of a lot like what we see now.
Right.
The way I look at it is that you had a WWE that was kind of pre-Monday Night Wars, then the war happened. In the world, we like to say that when wars happen in countries, they learn from that to not repeat the same mistakes. But now we kind of find ourselves back to a pre-war WWE
Right. Yep.
making the same mistakes with the ratings that reflect that. Do you think there's any way that they're going to be able to pull themselves out of this rut for a company that's lost more fans than they currently have?
I don't know. Every time we say I don't think so, a guy like Stone Cold or The Rock shows up, or somebody else, or someone else. I think they're going to have to really be threatened with either loss of their television or something big is going to happen for them to start to change the way they do business. Because after that, one of the lowest episodes of Raw they have ever done, everybody said, "Oh, we're gonna change." Vince is gonna, and I see the same stuff happening every Monday night. I can't watch Raw. I watch the first 10, 15 minutes. I have to change the channel, and it's not like these guys and gals aren't great. They're all very, very talented men and women. It's just Jim Ross said it on his podcast. Nobody's hot. Nobody is hot in that company, and that's a big problem. And you always have to bring in the legends, like a Legends Raw, or but the legends are starting to get too old now too. So they're going to really have to start sharpening up and making stars again. And I don't know what it's going to take, but because obviously financially they're doing quite well, and I think that as long as the networks are paying him the amount of money they're paying for his programming, it's gonna be tough. But I foresee something happening within the next year or two that will shake up this business. And AEW hasn't been that for the WWE, but perhaps if they gain some more momentum, who knows?
See, the way I like to look at it, and I say this just about every week, is that Vince McMahon has made more money than he can spend in whatever is left of the rest of his life.
Sure.
But the fact remains the same that I think they cultivate a culture where you have the one man at the top, and especially now with no fans,
Right.
he's the only one that they have to impress. And when it comes down to it, you're playing with your own job security. I'd almost draw a parallel to like what you said about, you don't want to, as a wrestler there, upset the apple cart because you're getting paid. This is your financial security.
Yep.
And if you're on the creative team, you don't want to bring an idea that's going to, maybe let them, show how dispensable you are and
Yep.
just replace you with some other intern that they have in Stamford. But when it comes down to it, he creates this culture of surrounding himself with yes men,
Yep.
with writers who are just trying to appease him, who are going to tell him what he wants. At a certain point, you need people that are going to have at least one good solid foot in reality to say this is the world we live in, regardless of what you feel it is, regardless of what you want to convey on television. This is what people want to see. And until that bubble bursts and someone is going to, take that stand, much like a Vince Russo, we're going to continue to have an out-of-touch leader who is going to produce what he wants with no understanding of the audience and of the audience that he lost, that he may still be able to win back, but unfortunately is not going to take the steps towards that. So
it scares me too, because the days of guys that work, see, we don't have guys that work the territories anymore. Most people that are in the WWE now came up through NXT and or they're developmental. What I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not good. They're fantastic. But what I mean by territory guys are those guys that came up in the territories know how to get over. And Steve Austin knew how to get over. Guys that came up in ECW knew how to get over. We had no choice. We had to get over. And the more you're seeing guys coming out of the WWE machine, the less they're going to be familiar with how to get over. And they're, you know what I mean? It's almost like you're just going to get a bunch of robots doing what they're told instead of somebody with that knowledge to take the ball and run with it, to reach for the brass ring, as Vince would say, kind of a thing, which is imaginary and whatever. But I don't know.
I almost think that's by design. I think that they like to find people. I mean, at the time where I was doing tryouts.
Oh, it is by design for now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think because they want to get people they can mold, they can brainwash, and, let them believe that this is the law of the land because WWE says so. So whatever our dogmas, our practices are, this is the rest of the world out there. Right. Whereas someone from the territory would know, no, this is what I would do to get over. And you give me a bigger stage to do it. That's what's going to propel me up. But, the brass ring, like you had said, it's a fictional thing because they control it. If you're getting killed off in the second act of a movie, your chances of winning an Oscar are 0 to none. So,
but let me tell you this: how is Keith Lee ever going to know how to really get over? He could barely get it through a match. You know what I mean? I'm not saying he's not talented, but these guys don't have the instinct. And now, especially with no fans, there's no fans telling you suck or you need to change, because a lot of times pro wrestling is listening to what the fans are saying. And I doubt a lot of the guys in the WWE or the gals are listening to what the fans are saying online. They usually listen to the fans in the arenas, and when they're not there to tell you, this is going to be an interesting ride, and I'm curious to see how it's going to play out within the next year. It's going to definitely be something to watch. If we're looking to grow the business, and especially in the WWE.
And do you feel that this is an industry-wide issue, that maybe some of the WWE mentality has seeped down into the other companies out there?
I think so, yeah. Oh, yeah. Everybody, there's no renegades left. And I think that's a big problem because, guys that kind of went against the grain in wrestling were always the guys that blew up, Steve Austin and, The Rock, and guys that kind of weren't. And I say those because those are the most successful.
I'd even say someone like Rob Van Dam.
Rob Van Dam or even Jeff Hardy, there's just, you're not going to get that anymore. And AEW, the guys that they have there are just not experienced enough, and they don't know any better. They don't know how to get over at all. And again, they're not being told by the fans because there are no fans. And I think that's really been, this past year has been really difficult for wrestlers of all levels, because you really can't assess, other than the ratings, which don't always tell you if you're over or not. I mean, you could argue that, but it's going to be interesting to see how we bounce back, especially when, hopefully by the end of the year, or hopefully sooner, COVID gets under control and we start getting some people back in these buildings, that we could really start to see what's what.
Mm-hmm. See, I would actually say, and this has been a bit of my crusade for the last little while, in saying that I feel the problem starts with the scouting. Now, obviously, WWE is an example. The problem is at the head, because there's no one that outranks Vince McMahon, and what he says is final. And so that's that. But I think in terms of finding the next Steve Austin or RVD or, The Rock, whoever it may be, I think the scouting is where the problem is, because certainly there are talented performers out there. There are wrestlers who, as you have said, have good basic fundamentals. But I mean, if that's all they're looking for, they may potentially be missing the boat in terms of finding the person who can translate to that television audience that can, connect with them.
That's very true. Yeah.
As good as someone's in-ring mechanics may be, connecting with the audience is the most important thing. Look at everything else out there on television. They're not competing against gymnastics or against amateur wrestling or anything like that. They're competing against primetime TV with what's essentially a kids show. And I mean, you could have the greatest, best written, most technically choreographed episode of Power Rangers, but you put that on in primetime, it's not going to beat The Sopranos or Game of Thrones. So, that's kind of how I see it. I'm pretty outspoken on the issue, but I think that the scouting also would need to change. And I've been a big advocate of the fact that us here in Canada, we have it pretty hard here because with the border, we can't go to perform on those bigger stages on the independents to expose our talent to the world, and no one is looking here. It's not like in the UK where they now have their performance center over there, and there's a lot of talent in the UK being looked at by a lot of the major companies. Canada's being overlooked, and we have a hell of a lot of great talents here that could be top-level talents in any of these companies, whether because they're that good or because the bar has been lowered so much. I myself, as one of them. But when it comes down to it, we have an uphill battle here. You yourself trained in Canada. So I mean, you're probably familiar with a lot of the struggles we have. And when there's a guy like a Lance Storm, a Chris Jericho, they've made it, but even in their journeys, it was going to somewhere like an ECW to get noticed, to get onto that bigger stage. So, we're kind of
Let me ask you this question, because there are so many great, I've noticed this though, that there are wrestlers that come out of Canada are usually pretty good. I mean, the ones I know, and they always have been, they take it very seriously and they train, and, it's a big difference actually when you come to, because there are so many independents in the US and we get a lot of people that aren't ring ready in the ring, unfortunately. Is it harder today to get over the border? I mean, I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about before COVID. Is it harder to cross the borders nowadays for something like pro wrestling?
It is a billion times harder to cross the border now. So the difference being that if you're from the United States and you want to come into Canada, you can do it. You can have a box load of 8x10s, T-shirts. You can come in, you can sell stuff. You can do whatever you want. From Canada to go to the United States, you cannot legally go to perform without having a specific visa, a green card, if you will. That is a big, lot of turmoil, a lot of red tape to acquire. You have to show proof that you are an exceptional talent. So you have to submit like magazine articles, these kinds of things.
I remember Lance Storm having to do that.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk to Lance because maybe he could help me navigate those waters. So Lance, if you're listening, Jeremy Prophet would love to have a word with you. I'd love to have you on the show.
No doubt. Yeah.
But all that to say, so you have to show, I guess, that you're not going to have a negative impact on the labor force. Otherwise, meaning that you're not taking a job away from an American citizen of equal talent, ready, willing, and able to do the same job. So that's for Canada. Now, unless you have a company like WWE, because what blows my mind is WWE can take a top pole vaulter from India and sign him to a deal, never wrestled a day in his life, but they see him as an exceptional talent. Their word alone, they can just put their name to it. This guy's got a work visa. You're someone who's worked at your craft for a long time, and you can't even so much as cross the border to perform in this sport, even if you're going to not make money, even if you're going just to do a tryout. There's still so much, red tape involved in that. I never made anything going to wrestle in the United States, and that was, because legally I can't. And there have been times I've been stopped, I've been detained, I've been searched, all those things.
Wow.
So it's a very hard process. And the thing is that the scouting is only in certain companies, certain big name independents, the PWGs, the GCWs, the CZWs. So with us not being able to go there, we can't be seen on that stage, and no one is watching us. And believe me, I always say, I'm the run to the litter here. Like, there are a lot of very talented wrestlers in Canada, men and women, but we're not afforded the same opportunities. In the United States, you really just have to, like, there's the expression of, you just put in the work. You really just have to put in the work. And there's so much work available, state to state. You can easily wrestle 3 to 4 times a week. We would gladly do it here in Canada and cross over and go, but we can't because the border stands in our way. I have wrestled for the top promotions here in Canada. You can look up my resume. I've wrestled, main evented, probably been champion of the top promotions here multiple times over. And it's not really something that leads to anything because people
Right.
aren't looking at Canada. So we have an entire generation of talent here, the generation before me, where a couple have made it, but they've made it on the merits of wrestling illegally in the United States to be able to
Gotcha.
get noticed. I've even had
Right.
people go on record and say that only through wrestling in the United States illegally had they been able to get catapulted to a bigger stage. And in my
Wow.
career, I've seen the same thing where I've done matches. I'll give you an example. Even in Canada here, when I wrestled for IWE in Maine, it allowed me to meet Rene Dupree, who's
Right.
also Canadian.
Yep.
And through seeing me wrestle there on that show in the United States, got me booked to do a 30-day tour in his company in Grand Prix Wrestling, where he put out an email saying, like, this is my email. If you're a great wrestler in Canada, message me. I'll take a look at you. We were booking, 7 or 8 people to do this tour. I sent him an email, got nothing, met him in the United States, wrestled there, and that then allowed me to participate in his tour. So even my own stock in my own country
Right. Yeah.
was increased because of going to the United States. And I could give you
Wow.
countless examples. It's not even the in-ring. And I appreciate that we're having this discussion because maybe because this is with you, it'll get
Sure.
more eyes on my case. But I preach this pretty much every week. Another example was I wrestled at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in New York. I think it was in Amsterdam, New York, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And the match was really nothing to write home about. But afterwards, it allowed me to rub shoulders with certain people. I happened to meet Fit Finlay, who was there, who had recently left the WWE, and he saw me, said I had a great look. We started up a conversation. Lo and behold, it led to me getting what would be my last set of WWE tryouts in 2012, just on the recommendation of Fit. So it's really being immersed in the American independent scene, which is so much bigger than here.
Right. Right.
Even Devin Nicholson, Hannibal, who runs Hannibal TV,
Yep,
he
yep.
says that the majority of his viewers, even though he's a Canadian channel, he's from Ottawa, he's 2 hours down the road from me, the majority of his viewership is in the United States. The majority of his subscribers on YouTube, Twitter, followers as well. It's just so much bigger in the United States, and we don't have that opportunity. And the scouts for all the major companies, like Ring of Honor, PCO
Yeah.
is the only Canadian in Ring of Honor, despite the fact that they have numerous people from the UK, 4 or 5 Mexicans on the roster,
Right.
even several Australians. We're the neighboring country, only about 6 hours or so from Baltimore, which is their head office. One Canadian in the company, which is PCO. So
Wow. That's crazy.
I've
And that's
been
a
saying-
shame too, because there are so many great Canadian talents that should be here.
Yeah, we're a proven resource. We've provided the wrestling business with great talents. Even where I'm from here in Quebec, there are guys who could be top performers on all the major companies right now. That they have the mic skills, the look, the in-ring ability. Unfortunately, the scouting is just not here. So it's my personal crusade to say, hey, I'm going to make as much noise about this and bring
Right.
that reality and let people know, hey, Canada's got a lot of great talents. You don't believe me? Check us out because you'll be surprised. And that's what we face. That's our battle.
Wow, that's crazy. That's too bad too. I mean, hell, I went to Canada to train, so that should say something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a broken system. Even
It really is. That's a
like
shame. I didn't know it was that bad.
it's extremely bad, and it's why not a lot of Canadians have persevered. You look at all the top Canadians that have come through, even guys, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, all these guys. It was the work that they did in the United States that got the eyes on them, not the work that they did back here. And there's really no exceptions to the rule. So that's what we have in front of us. There's generations of guys that could have been maybe the guys to change the business, make it better, that have been overlooked. And all
that's
of that,
a shame.
in spite of the fact that there are a lot of Canadians that hold prominent positions in companies. Guys like Don Callis, Scott D'Amore, Chris Jericho, one of the top guys in AEW, a great Canadian, Kenny Omega, also Canadian, from here in Manitoba. A lot of great Canadian people in these prominent positions that could be helping to open the door, maybe try to, look at us more, scout us so they could be that benefactor to say, hey, here's a guy that can come in, be good for our company. And it's not happening. It's still, a lot of guys being swooped up off the American indie scene.
And that's it. Yeah. That's a shame.
That's pretty much
We'll
it.
have to change that.
Well, one step at a time.
Well, just speaking about it helps bring issue to it, so it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it's what I try to do every time I'm on the other end of one of these interviews, is to try to raise awareness, because the more we talk about it, the more something's going to give. Just to give you another example, like the UK, From how it was explained to me, pretty much the way it works there, if we want to go work there, is you have whichever company is bringing you in, sign for the work visa. I think it costs maybe £90.
Okay.
And then you can go work for 3 months in the UK.
Wow.
Nice and simple.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in the United States, which is so much closer,
Right.
no dice. So
That's
what we
crazy.
face. That's
Yeah.
the frustration of my career, and why the guy you met 7 years ago with all the talent that I have hasn't really gone anywhere, hasn't blown up, because this is what stands in front of us. Just
Right.
the doors
Wow.
to the country are locked.
Yeah, that sucks. Wow.
No. It is what it is, but
Yeah.
it's never over. Like I said, when I look at guys like a Chris Jericho, like a Pierre Ouellet, hey, they're in their 50s and they're still going. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I for one ain't giving up anytime soon, and I would say the same to any Canadian talent out there within the sound of my voice. That this is something that we can overcome. We just need to keep at it, and then something's going to give eventually.
Yeah.
But definitely scouting, I think,
Yeah.
is what's missing in wrestling. And I like to believe that there are better talents out there in the world that haven't been signed to deals with a WWE or an AEW, that there are better talents out there. And unfortunately, maybe there's maybe there's a set of politics that are standing in their way in wherever that may be.
Right. Yeah, but that's for a whole nother podcast.
Indeed. And I can see we're wrapping up here, and I appreciate all the time you've given to me here.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you so much.
Maybe you could, I'm always going to be a fan of yours, but first and foremost, I'll always be a friend, and I appreciate
Absolutely. Thank
all
you.
the
I
valuable
appreciate
lessons
you.
that you
Thank
taught
you,
me.
Jeremy. Thank you.
Yep.
It's been a pleasure, man.
And hopefully we can do this again. Just before going, maybe let the people know your social medias, where they
Sure.
can follow you, where they can hear you. You have the floor, my friend.
Absolutely. All right, guys. If you're on Twitter, you can follow me at PJ Polaco. Also on Instagram at PJ Polaco. And of course, if you want a Just Incredible t-shirt, go on over to ProWrestlingTees.com/Just Incredible. I have over 20 designs. Go check it out. And that's it.
Yeah, cool. And can I maybe get a follow from you on Twitter once we're done?
You got it. Absolutely.
I very
It's
much
done.
appreciate it. It's been a pleasure having you on here. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. And,
Anytime you want, man.
Like
Thank
I said, if anyone else needs a very outspoken Canadian with a hell of a story to tell, let them know that I'm their guy. But thanks again for doing this. I'll definitely be keeping in touch with you. Anytime you want to hop back on here with us, we'll be happy to have you. On behalf of myself and the Jofo podcast, this has been Jofo in the Ring. This has been not just the coolest, not just the best,
Just incredible.
I'm Jeremy Prophet, and I look forward to seeing you guys again. Have a great night.
See you later, guys. Thank you.
This is Frank Jofo for Jofo in the Ring, and we would like to take this opportunity to share with you our sponsor, Balboa Bakery. If you're in the mood for fresh baked focaccia, an array of sliced cold cuts and cannolis to die for, and of course, the finest Italian products known to man, look no further than Balboa Bakery. Go the distance with Balboa Bakery. Located at 102 Saint Jean-Baptiste Boulevard, Local 52 in Chateauguay.